So you'll recall, like way back when, we gave a lecture called "Can Atheist Be Spiritual?" And I think that's a very important conversation because often when we think of spirituality or we think of religion, we often think of these things in theistic terms. So even in this country, in the United States of America and various other places, Western liberal democracies, when we use the word religion, we're likely to use it interchangeably with the word faith, right? Like, what religion do you belong to, or what tradition are you a part of? You might ask that question in this way: What's your faith? Notice the inherent assumption here that religion is about faith. And by faith, often we mean an intellectual assent to some dogma that I was either born into or later came to accept for one reason or another. You see? So there's an inherent assumption that we make about spiritual life and about religion that it's about God. It's about theism. And we know that that's like a very difficult thing for so many people because God is a word that comes with a lot of baggage. Like, oh my God. Like the people that have been in religious traditions, many of them are traumatized by those traditions. Like those institutions have failed them in one way, shape, or form, and they're leaving those traditions. And often they feel they have to leave metaphysical inquiry aside, spirituality aside, because what they encountered in that religion, in that tradition, certainly was not life affirming. And so therefore, I mean, like the whole thing gets a bad rep. The baby Jesus gets thrown out with the bathwater, and it's like religion is not for me. And all the art that religion offers, and the metaphysical inquiry, and all the philosophical stuff, all the spiritually edifying things about religion, that's not for me anymore because of that trauma. Now, the way that the Eastern spiritual traditions have solved for this, especially in this country, is by offering non-theistic forms of religion, which I think is so inclusive and beautiful. The idea that religion doesn't have to be about God, but it can be oriented around non-theistic principles like dharma, or like, by dharma is meant maybe the impersonal laws of the universe and the quest to be in alignment with it. Maybe something like the self, the idea that there's some reality not out there in the sky, like keeping a naughty or nice list like Santa, like sending some people to heaven or some people to eternal hell for not observing Lent. Like it's not like that, but there's some reality maybe within me. And the idea that the quest should be turned inward as opposed to looking out into the skies, that's incredibly appealing. To say that religion is not about God, but about the self. It's almost as if people who have a problem with God are now invited back into a metaphysical inquiry, a spiritual quest that for many people can only be conceived of within religion. That's the liberating and wonderful contribution of Eastern spirituality, to say that there are forms of spirituality that are non-theistic and are equally spiritually edifying. So in that lecture way back when, Can Atheists Be Spiritual?, my goal there was to present some of these traditions, like Sankhya, which is non-theistic for many reasons, to present, besides Sankhya, a beautiful tradition, Advaita Vedanta, which, although is quite permissive of theism on one level, is ultimately non-theistic. And these two traditions are like Hindu in one sense because they're based on the Vedas, and yet, as Hindu traditions based on Vedic revelation, they are non-theistic. I even went so far as to say that Purva Mimamsa, which is the orthodox, most orthodox Vedic school of Indian spirituality, based on the Karma Kanda, meaning the ritualistic portion of the ancient and holy Vedas, even they are kind of agnostic. We could even argue that the Vedic ritualists do not subscribe necessarily to the idea of an all-powerful, maybe even all-benevolent creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the universe. For them, it's enough to do a fire ceremony to propitiate Indra to get their ancestors into a celestial realm in which they will be able to temporarily enjoy superhuman delights. So it's interesting to note that even the Vedic ritualists who are interacting with forces of nature, personifying those forces of nature even, they too might not have been interested in the idea of God. Although that idea is intimated in many of the hymns we find in the Samhita portions of the Vedas, like it's not necessarily the case that the Vedic ritualists, the Vedic exegetes, even they might not necessarily have accepted God. So you find in India, by India, I mean the tradition that spreads into what today would be Bangladesh and Pakistan and Tibet and into many maybe parts of Sri Lanka and even Southeast Asia, like that entire Indic civilization, we find that it presents so many forms of spirituality that are non-theistic. And that invites us to maybe those of us who are theistic, those of us who do like the idea of God, to really question what we mean by God. I think the Indic traditions over the years, over the millennia, over the yugas, have offered so many refined reflections on God. So refined that we've, in some cases, even kicked the guy out and just reoriented the spiritual quest towards the self or towards something else, as it were. Now, there are traditions that come which we consider heterodox, like meaning not based on the Vedas, that are also non-theistic. And the two major heterodox traditions in India that emerged on Indian soil are actually both of them non-theistic. Of course, Buddhism and Jainism. So Buddhism is interesting because it has many different phases and many different forms, but throughout all of its forms, even when there's like deity work involved, even when there's like mantra, sadhana around a particular aspect of reality, ultimately, through and through, Buddhists are non-theist. And the most theistic form of Buddhism might be like Shentong Madhyamaka Buddhism. And that's a somewhat, like we just discussed, maybe lesser known form of Madhyamaka Buddhism. And most Buddhism, except for that, is pretty much non-theistic. And that's why Buddhism is very appealing, in the West especially, for those who have religious trauma. Because finally, there's a path that is welcoming of like scientific inquiry, that is willing to engage you on a level of reason and intellect. So before, you thought that religion was about faith, blindly assenting to what a book says. Now, here comes a tradition that says, you can question things, like you can ask questions. And more importantly, it's not about believing what a book says, but about looking to your own experience. That's what the Buddha embodies. And yet, these non-theistic traditions can be just as abusive and just as problematic and just as authoritarian as the most theistic institution. It's like even there, you're invited to inquire. You're invited to like engage with your own experience. And yet even there's a temptation to just do what somebody said because it's written in a book. Even there's a temptation to look at others as an authority. All the while the Buddha is telling us, Atmo Dipo Bhavati, be thy own light. Be thine own light. Be a guide to yourself. Look to your own experience. And see what it has to teach you. Even then, with that invitation, there are many people who turn Buddha into a god and Buddhism into a religion and the Buddhist text, not as an invitation to do your own inquiry, but as like rules to follow or something. And so you have, in the case of like, say, Myanmar, you have Buddhist monks in saffron robes who belong to a tradition where ahimsa, non-violence, is the ultimate virtue. You have them in pictures holding AK-47s, chasing out Muslims, chasing out Rohingyas and whatnot. So it's not that Abrahamic religions have a monopoly on violence. The only reason we think that is because often we're only really interacting with cases of Abrahamic religions engendering violence. For instance, the Protestant the Reformation, like there during this period, a 30-year period of very, very violent war between the Catholics and the Protestants. We have in mind the Inquisition. We see, of course, the colonization projects that we find all around the world, whether by Spanish conquistadors or whatnot. It's like this preaching of gospel in the Abrahamic sense has often meant a lot of people die or are enslaved or are tortured or whatnot. And like that aggression we often think is monopolized by the somewhat imperial versions of Abrahamic religions. But that same violence you find even in the seemingly most non-violent of non-theistic traditions, Buddhism, like in the case of the Rohingyas and whatnot, and in the case of Tibet, we find great violence amongst various schools of Buddhism. For instance, a particular school might not like the interpretation of another school, and so they might ally themselves to a particular, maybe, warlord, and that warlord will help them destroy that other monastery. That's happened, by the way. And so the reason why Gentong or Shentong Madhyamaka Buddhism is not so popular is because many of their monasteries were razed to the ground, and their followers like assimilated into other schools, like namely like more Prasangika, Madhyamaka type schools. Prasangika type schools. Anyway, the point here is to say, whether the religion is theistic or non-theistic, the problem with institutions, with authorities, the problem with deferring responsibility to someone or something else remains. Be that as it may though, it's wonderful that Jainism, and I can't speak too much to Jainism because I haven't studied it in any real capacity, but it's wonderful that like Jainism and Buddhism, and even within the Vedic fold, Sankhya and Advaita, Vedanta specifically, these are all traditions that invite you to engage with your spirituality without ever once asking about God or thinking about God or praying to God. That could be really, really life-changing for somebody, especially somebody who has religious trauma. So it's obvious the appeal of Buddhism in the West to a hyper-intellectual, hyper-rational West, like scientific West. The Buddhist approach seems very, very appealing. And often Sankhya and Advaita Vedanta would be just as appealing, except not many people know that much about them until recently. Until like proponents of Advaita from the Ramana Maharshi camp and from the Nisargadatta Maharaj camp, a lot of them Westerners who had gone to India and met these masters like Somerset Maugham and whatnot. Even Mark Twain was in Varanasi meeting a great Advaitin, Bhaskarananda and whatnot. So especially like because of the influence of these prominent modern contemporary Advaita Vedanta teachers, there's more awareness now around the work of Adi Shankaracharya, Sri Shankara, and people are really starting to like enjoy that. The way that they enjoyed Buddhism maybe in the early 2000s, now they're really starting to get into Advaita Vedanta for perhaps the same reason, because it's a religion not premised on God. It's a religion or a spiritual quest premised upon the self, the inquiry into what I am, not what this reality or the overarching absolute is. And so therefore we find in religious life generally two dispositions. There are those who look towards, as we say, Brahman, being the absolute, the all, and those people might have a more theistic bent. They're more likely to say pray or develop a relationship or engage with things on an emotional and aesthetic level. They're more interested in maybe ritual, and those rituals are highly aesthetic. There could be bells and smells, as my friends say. And like, of course, like there's an emotional component to it that involves song and dance. And so you get what the vast majority of religions are interested in, which is devotional theism with rituals and with cultural practices like singing and dancing. And many people are turned off by that. So like many people like it. Most people are probably in some form of religion like that. But some people move away from that because they have this other disposition where they prefer it to be about the self, and where the inquiry is more intellectual maybe, and maybe more meditative, maybe more mystical. So instead of like jumping around and singing a song, instead of praying to God, maybe some people would prefer to close your eyes and focus on their breath. Maybe they would prefer to ask questions like, who am I? And what is real and what is unreal? Like this jnana yoga, we call it, this yoga of inquiry, this yoga of knowledge, we find very strongly represented in non-theistic traditions. At least that's the assumption. In Buddhism, in Jainism, and of course in Advaita Vedanta, jnana yoga seems to be the emphasis. And so we think, okay, when there's no God, we're more likely to think. But that's not true though, because in theistic traditions, you get just as much intellectual inquiry, except it's usually using scriptural axioms, or it's usually like reasoning about God that like, you know, for instance, Saint Anselm, he's asking this question within the Catholic tradition. Did God create Satan with that nature by which he errs? Because then if God were to punish Satan for being Satan, then it's God's fault for creating Satan in that way. So Anselm, Saint Anselm, one of the great scholastic masters of the Catholic tradition, is asking these wonderful questions about free will and determinism, about God, like, and his creation and the influence that God has on what he creates. Why did Satan, the devil, fall? Like, what did he do that caused him to be kicked out? These are questions worth asking, not necessarily to resolve issues in the story or in the narrative, but to think about God in a philosophical sense. St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the best examples of a theistic intellect, who's asking really important questions, reasoning not just based on scripture, but using like all the Western tools of reason that he gets from Aristotle and Socrates and whatnot, like Aristotle especially. He's using all of that, deploying the whole Platonic, Neoplatonic, Aristotelian like technology, as it were, to Christian scripture. And asking the arguably the most important questions about God, and about also what we as quote-unquote Christians in the world ought to do in order to be aligned with God's will. And we get great questions about, like, is war ever just? And one of St. Thomas Aquinas' great contributions to human civilization and thought is just war theory. Like, when is it okay to kill other people? And would God ever enjoin such a thing? And of course, more modern philosophers like Kant, and I would argue Kant is like a scholastic, in the vein of St. Anselm and Augustine and whatnot, Aquinas and whatnot. But be that as it may, Kant ask important questions about scripture also. Soren Kierkegaard, all of these more modern philosophers are asking questions like, when Abraham was asked by God to take his son up to the mountain and sacrifice him, how did Abraham know that God was speaking to him and not some spirit or something? Like the question that Descartes asks, like, how do I know that I'm not being deluded by some kind of evil demon? Like, wake up, Neo, you're in the Matrix. I don't know that I'm not in the Matrix. I don't know that I'm not dreaming right now. Like, I could be wrong about everything. And not only that, I could be a brain in the vat. I could be a person in a coma with the last 13 seconds of brain activity. This whole thing could be a delusion. How do I know that the way I'm seeing reality is how reality actually is? This kind of skeptical inquiry is taken up as early as Sextus Empiricus, but it's really developed in, like, Descartes. And it's the heart of the scientific method, and Descartes is arguably the father of modern science for this reason, his willingness to question everything and to skeptically ask things like this. And so this question of how do I know it was God speaking to me when I heard that voice telling me to take my son up to the mountain and kill him, that's a question that Kierkegaard will ask, and it's an epistemological question. How do you know when God is speaking to you? And then there are ethical questions. What is ethical? Would God, who is considered to be in these Christian traditions benevolent and ethical, and like reasonable, would this God of reason and ethics and benevolence, would such a God demand of us something that we consider unethical? And these conversations are important because then when we're trying people for, like, say the Nuremberg trials or something, and these people are like, oh, well, we did these horrible things, but we were only acting under orders. It's the material that Aquinas supplies and that like Kant supplies and that Kierkegaard supplies that allows us to say things like, be that as it may, you still knew that what you did was wrong. So then things like manifest or natural law become interesting, where your commanding officer says, now kill a bunch of civilians. And you as a soldier have a duty, as it were, to follow what your commander says. That might be ethical. The ethics here is, I have a role, I have a duty, and I'm going to do what the role and the duty demand of me. But what if, in the name of duty, I'm asked to like carpet bomb a wedding or something? Or if I'm asked to like kill a bunch of children that are being used as human shields? Perhaps I, as a human being, have an innate sense of morality. This question is being asked in Aquinas even. Is there such a thing as an innate morality? Like, do we feel deep down inside that it would be wrong to kill all these children? Or that it would be wrong to carpet bomb the wedding? These are innocent, non-combatant civilians. Like, I'm being asked to kill them. That's not right. And then on that basis, can I opt out? Can I say, I will not follow this command? I will not obey an order that tells me to massacre a bunch of innocent civilians. Some would argue, and many have argued, that even as a soldier acting under duty, this is what your duty really is. Like, you have to opt out of something. You have to conscientiously object to something that you feel in your heart to be morally wrong. But then again, is there a universal sense of what's morally right and what's morally wrong? Because the person who is about to like commit this act of violence might feel in their heart that this is a deeply good thing to do, because this group of people that I'm about to kill is a threat to the people that I love. And so to kill them, even though they seem like innocent combatants, would be ultimately speaking the right thing to do. So what if God is like that army general telling Abraham to go up on the mountain and kill his son? Like, should Abraham conscientiously object? Is this like a test? Is God like testing to see whether or not Abraham will follow his ethical code of conduct? But if he does that, then he's following his own will and not God's will. But how can he be sure of God's will? You see, these are wonderful questions. And these are questions that are asked, and these are questions that are discussed. However, sadly, the great intellectual and philosophical contributions of the Catholic tradition are sometimes overlooked. We forget about these great masters because people's experience of Abrahamic religion, and I would argue all religion, is not a highly intellectually refined process of inquiry. It's not an invitation to wrestle with the ideas that we find in the text. I mean, St. Augustine, what beautiful reflections he had about how difficult it was to like accept words in the Bible. He was like, God, take away my lust, but not just yet. And that was wonderful. The Catholic tradition welcomed his honesty. Like, there were times when he would say, in Latin, I don't know, I used to know it in Latin, like the wonderful phrase, sin with gusto. Do you know there's like a St. Augustine phrase that I love? If you're going to sin with gusto. St. Augustine said that. And he's a saint. And he's recognized as one of the great intellectual giants of the Catholic tradition. So it's interesting to note that there are such people asking profound questions. But if you yourself were to ask such a question, in most people's experience, that question would be shut down. You would be told to like, just look at the book and take what the book says literally, even though most of the time we're not reading the book in its original language. Like, it's remarkable to me, and I've said this time and time again, that people will go to war based on a book that they have themselves never read in its original language, much less understood the cultural context for. That's profound, that a person is willing to accept a translation of the Word of God, which was spoken arguably in Aramaic, in Hebrew, maybe in Greek, as per the New Testament. But like, we never care about that. We just like take for granted that what our pastor tells us is what is there in the Bible. We ourselves might not actually even read it. But when we ask questions, often we're met with vacant stares. The pastor blinks at us. They don't really know how to answer the question because they themselves might not be aware of the intellectual traditions of their own religion. And so it's not fair to say that philosophical inquiry and intellectual pursuits, they're exclusive to non-theistic traditions like Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. There's a lot of profound and beautiful and moving philosophy that is done even within theistic traditions. This is called theology. And we've moved away from it. As a culture, we've moved away from theology. That kind of philosophy is maybe not as fashionable as it once was because we've moved away from God. And part of the reason why we've moved away from God is because the institutions that represent her do a poor job of representing her. You know, they preach a God of love, and at the same time, from the pulpits, incite violence. It won't be long before people, recognizing that hypocrisy, just step out of the room. And why should they be there anymore when there are other ways of understanding reality that are far more convincing, like the age of reason, the age of enlightenment, offering us the heady wine of scientific inquiry. Here, there's no one book that's exclusively true. Here, you're invited to interact with your immediate experience and base your knowledge, your facts off of that experience, which is so much more convincing than making claims on like a hypothetical afterlife. I can't verify that, but I can ask this question of like, is there gravity? And I can design an experiment that can show me maybe right now and right here whether or not my theory about gravity is true. I mean, like gravity, like God, is an invisible force and that moves things. But like, unlike God, the conversation around gravity invites more skepticism, invites more questioning, invites more peer review and corroboration. It has more books, right? Like with religion, sometimes there's like one book and like that's the book and you're just supposed to accept everything in that book and everyone else's book is wrong. And just like, that's that. Whereas in the scientific process, you could say, well, you could write a paper about what you found based on your experiment. And then other people can look at that paper, reproduce your experiment and see whether or not it worked for them. And if it didn't, they can write back. That's the idea. And their literature, their academic contribution is just as valid as yours. And now there's this like marketplace of ideas where claims are checked and balanced against other claims. Things are either corroborated or pushed back on. And that's beautiful. That environment is way more intellectually rigorous and way more inviting than one in which the book, and by the way, a book that nobody's ever read in its original language, the book is just always right. And everyone else is wrong, and let's go kill them. I think it's no longer fashionable to buy into like that worldview. Post the age of reason, post the age of enlightenment. So it's no surprise that more and more every day, people who are disillusioned with religious institutions are finding themselves in like more scientific physicalist or materialist spaces, where their view on reality is shaped by what science has to say about it. And so it's not really the case that like these people are doing experiments and actually doing science, like, and actually basing their facts off of experience. They're just as religious as the rest of us, except their religion is premised upon the claims of science, not the claims of the Bible. And often they're seen as mutually exclusive because these two traditions have fought each other and science is obviously going to win for all the reasons aforementioned. And therefore most of us are still religious, except we might not belong to a church anymore. We might not belong to a mosque or to a synagogue or to a temple, but we do, like, as human beings, we're innately religious, arguably, and we do just take on faith what science tells us. So scientific physicalism and scientific materialism is not necessarily the same as the scientific process, though the scientific process as defined by Francis Bacon and others, like that, you know, presenting a theory and like questioning the theory and collecting evidence and all that kind of data collection process and all the varied tools, many of them now very refined, involving computer models and like complex like data stuff. Like all of that is used, as it were, to understand the world, and then philosophical claims are made based on that understanding. And so that's called physicalism or materialism. And that's typically the view, like I was saying last week, that we, all of us, whether religious or not, I almost said religious or irreligious, but I don't think that's the right word there. It's like whether we're religious or not, whether we identify as being a member of a particular faith or church or even a member of a non-theistic group. We're most of us, I think, inadvertently, as a member of like this modern world, we're most of us inadvertently born into materialism or scientific physicalism. That's just the dominant worldview. And that's because the previous worldview, the one that accepted the creator, maintainer, and destroyer God, and usually just the creator God, that worldview is no longer fashionable for all the aforementioned reasons. So the fashionable, the fad, the philosophical, if you will, philosophical fad of this day and age is scientific physicalism, scientific materialism. So like I said last week, this is the view that there is a world and it exists objectively and independently apart from me. This is very different from what you usually hear in the tantric kind of Advaita Vedanta spaces, which tend to be more idealistic. There you hear the world is an experience arising within consciousness. It has no independent or objective reality, which is a crazy claim for most of us because most of us, I think, unquestioningly and unthinkingly accept that the world is out there. That's how it feels, at least. Naively, at first glance, it feels like there is indeed a world. And in this world, there are other people. And not only that, this world was here before I came, and it will be here way after I leave. So I'm just experiencing this world. And I'm experiencing it through my senses. In fact, the senses The eyes, the ears, of course the eyes mainly, but the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin, these are the most reliable ways to interact with reality. So because I can touch a table, there must be a table. This is our sort of common sense view, and therefore the scientific materialism and physicalism worldview is highly appealing because it premises its claims based on things that seem intuitively true. Like, I touch a table, I feel like there's a table, so there must be a table. What else do I need to prove the reality of a table but that experience of touching a table? It's wonderfully simple and elegant in that way. Of course, you could have dreamt that you touched the table. Like, in a dream, you could have just as physical an experience. You can't prove that it's not a dream just because it's physical, right? Like, in a dream, you could have dreamt that you touched a table. So just because you're touching a table doesn't actually mean there's a table. But hey, if you don't ask such questions, it's convincing enough. It's convincing enough that if I touch a table, there must be a table, and there's reason to believe, or at least it feels like naively, there's a table outside of me, independently and objectively of me. And what is the nature of this world? It's made of matter. It exists objectively and independently apart from me. It's there before I came, it's going to be there after I leave, and it is essentially matter. And this matter is incredibly complex, but it's like physical. It's a physical something or other. It's a thing. So if you start with, like, say, a basic idea of the atom, which you get in ancient Greece, and of course even in the ancient Indian Vaisheshika system, the idea of Anu, like, what is that atom? You can say it's just a discrete, like, basic building block of reality. It's the simplest possible thing. And Democritus is already, like, suggesting these things in ancient Greece. But like we said last week, it isn't until John Dalton presents this kind of bowling ball method of understanding reality that we accept the atom as this, like, ball. And, you know, I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard from my friends who are in these fields. I'm myself not in the field of physics or anything, so these are all my claims based on friends in the field. But they tell me that, like, John Dalton was like a bowling nut. Like, he liked lawn bowling or something. So he's interacting with balls a lot. And he also, allegedly, reasons in this way that if the biggest things in the world, like the moon, or I mean, he's looking at heavenly bodies, if you will, and he's saying, like, you know, the biggest things in the world, like the moon and the sun, are spherical. If they're like orbs, wouldn't that be equally true for the smallest things? So, like, what would the discrete building block of reality be if not a ball? So his addiction to bowling, maybe, his contemplation about big celestial bodies, these could all be influencing his way of understanding matter. And he's presenting this model, and he's there in front of the Royal Society in London. He's presenting, like, ways in which this model explains a lot of the stuff that happens in this world. Like, for instance, if you put sugar in water, why is it the sugar disappears? Where does it go? And why does the water become sweet? Why can't I see the grains of sugar anymore? And then John Dalton can stand in front of you and with a big, like, kind of container, he can pour in some big balls. And he had big balls to stand in front of the committee and say, like, this is the view on matter. Like, that's kind of cool of him. Like, this is his view. He reasons it out based on a few ideas that he has, and then he experimentally argues for it. And maybe he'll put big balls in there and he'll say, this is the water. And then he'll take small balls and he'll put it in the big ball with the big balls, and you'll see the small balls kind of go in between the big balls. Like, see, it's going into the. You can explain a lot with this model of balls. It's kind of elegant, spherical model of reality. And then it gets complicated, right? And then after a while, we realize it's not that simple. The simplest, most discrete particle of matter is not actually material all the way through. Because what Ernest Rutherford then discovers, like we said last week, is that this is mostly empty space. This atom that, you know, Dalton is suggesting, this atom, this first man of sorts, like this fella is, like, in a Buddhist sense, almost emptier than you think. Because John Dalton's ball is a solid, round thing which has mass, which explains why, you know, things are, you could put something in water and the water will be displaced, and you can say eureka and run naked through the streets. Like, there's all this conversation happening in ancient times in Rome and Greece about weight and about, like, all these things are already being discussed. But mass, weight, these are all things that depend on matter. It's matter that has mass. And then later on you'll talk about gravity, and, like, that will teach us about weight. All these things are wonderful, sophisticated discussions. But, like, experimentally, this ball that's supposed to be full of stuff is actually empty. Ernest Rutherford is experimentally showing that. Like, he's shooting these, like, I don't know what, alpha particles or something. Again, I haven't really read the actual literature on this experiment. I'm just talking about it based on the understanding that I get from the ones who teach it to me. So again, scientists in the room, forgive me. It's not my area, but, like, just speaking from outside the scientific tradition. This is the impression that I get. So Ernest Rutherford is shooting these alpha particles or something at a gold sheet or a tin sheet or something, and a lot of those particles are just going straight through, which is weird, because you would expect to find that if something was made of atoms, and if atoms are like full of stuff, then wouldn't they deflect the alpha particles? Like, wouldn't this particle bounce off the stuff? But it's not doing that. It's just going straight through. Like, what the fuck? That's weird. That's not what you would expect to find if John Dalton was right. Now, this is the glory of the scientific method, though. The question could be asked, is John Dalton right? Like, he's not like some saint whose mystical experience must be taken on faith. It's an experience that invites verification. So that's the beauty. The scientific approach gives us that tool of like engaging with reality in this critical way. I'll try to figure out if what other people said is really true or not. And if it's true, then I should be able to verify it in my own experience. That's what Ernest Rutherford is doing as a responsible scientist. He's testing theories, trying to develop and refine his understanding on matter. So he's shooting these particles through a sheet of matter, and he's surprised to find that they're all just going through, as if there's no sheet at all. That's spooky. You know, by the way, they were close to this realization that the Buddhist and the Advaita Vedantins and the Tantric idealists would have, but a lab assistant either saved the day or ruined the day, depending on whether or not you're a realist or idealist. You'll have a different account here. With the lab assistant, just like is looking through the data, looking through lots and lots of data as meticulously as possible, and does actually notice that in the data there are these minute deflections. Like, something is happening. There are deflections. It's an anomaly almost. The deflection seems to be happening in this way that, like, it's almost negligible, but it's there. And again, the glory of the scientific method, it seems like there's this precision, there's this like attention to detail that they're willing to look at. And of course, the religious traditions might say the devil is in the details. Precisely. Because it's like things like this that can drastically change your understanding of reality. What is the devil if not something that threatens the status quo? Not necessarily a bad guy, just something that threatens the status quo. So coming back to this then, what this lab assistant is finding is there are some deflections. Whew. Save the day. Where, you know, we might have skipped to the Buddhist idealistic realization that there is no matter. Instead, we're saying, like, there is matter, but it's just not the case that it's all over the atom. It's like most of the atom is empty space, and the matter, the thing that gives it mass, and of course weight, when you put gravity in the picture, it's like it's the nucleus or something. There's something in the middle. And when you think about like the proportions here, we have like, you know, science teachers in middle school saying, like, think of a fig or something. They'll give some kind of illustration at a football stadium or something. And like, that's crazy to think about, that the mass of an atom is like, you guys are like, this is really starting to sound like middle school physics or something. But you'll see why all of this is important in a bit. The mass is not distributed across the atom. The atom is not a thing as much as we think it is. It's just there in the center. And then we get more refined notions about protons and neutrons and electrons and how things work within the matter called atom. And we realize it's dynamic, actually. This is where we last week talked about the Tantric Charvaka. We talked about how you'll still recognize Shakti without ever having studied a Tantra, without ever having meditated once in your life, without ever having done a Kali Puja. And to Sonu's point about, you know, to what extent do people know about Kali? I don't think it's possible for anyone in this world to not know about Kali, because Kali is in all things as all things. And the languaging is different, but ultimately, if we understand Kali in this deep way as pure dynamism, notice how the recognition of Kali is available to any sincere materialist, sincerely and honestly looking at the atom. Because they'll see that the picture is not a static ball of mass. It's a dynamic, constantly shifting process of movement. Like, there's, in the atom, mass, but there's also this polarity between, like, say, electrons and protons. And of course, neutrons are added later. I was like, whoa, like, now you can invite some conversation around linguistic mysticism and how in Sanskrit you have male, masculine terms, like, you know, like Brahma, for instance. You have feminine terms like Parvati or Saraswati. And then you have words like Brahman or Namaha, which are just neuter. So in language, in grammar, not to say biological or sociological gender, but in language, there's grammatical gender. And now in biology, we say, again, there's a spectrum of gender, and like, it's a complicated process to assign gender and sex to a body and to a mind. Like, the mind is conditioned to think maybe pink is a girl's color, which is totally like an arbitrary sort of 6-7 like cultural consensus. Pink is is it a girl college? Is it a boy college? Like, what jobs are girl jobs and boy jobs? Like, are those the only two genders? Like, these conversations around gender, these are important. Conversations around biological sex, these are all important. And we find that even in the atom, something like that can be introduced where there's like this polarity, but it's not as dichotomous or as it's not a dichotomy, as we'll put it that way. There's something in between, as it were, a neutron. So our understanding about the atom itself is incredibly tantric and Shaiva, the interplay between a static proton and a dynamic electron. There's a Shiva and Shakti sort of experience occurring there, and this third reconciling principle. Like, you can talk about para, apara, you can talk about all these things, sattva, rajas, and tamas, and any kind of triad, like icha, kriya, jnana, you know these terms, those who've been studying this for a while. But like, in the atom, the Devi Traya is there. The Trika is available to you in the study of the atom. But again, this model is pretty outdated as far as we know. Because like then it's quickly replaced by even more refined, even more thrilling understandings of matter. So like, first of all, we think it's a thing. There's like some ball full of mass and it's like just static and it's there and a table is made of it. And the whole world is ultimately reduced to it. And then we look at that thing, and we realize, oh my God, it's mostly empty space. How crazy. Because by the way, if it's mostly empty space, it's weird that when I touch a table, it feels like it's made of these like discrete units of reality. For Aristotle, the table was the discrete unit of reality. The table is a table. So it cannot be reduced to anything else. And what John Dalton is saying is, no, you can reduce the table to atoms. And then what Ernest Rutherford is saying is that even if you do that, it's mostly empty space. The mass is in the nucleus, which is kind of like in the center of the atom. So isn't it weird that when I touch an atom, I'm feeling it to be solid, when it's like, not really. That's the first moment when you should have this like Cartesian like skepticism of like, wait. Maybe what I'm seeing is not actually what's there. Like, I saw a straight stick. Straight as can be, never once kissed a guy. And then you put it in the water and the fucking thing bends. Like, what is it, like a pride parade and they're like 8 vodka shots in? Like, what I thought was straight turns out to be bendier than I could have even imagined. And congratulations, I'm happy you had that discovery. But like, it's interesting though, right? It's interesting though that like there is something in my sense perception that doesn't actually, as far as I know, line up with reality. Because I know the stick is straight. And yet when I put it in the water, it's 8 vodka shots in and it's LA and it's pride. Like, it's bent as bent can be. It's curvy. It's not straight. Like, fuck. What? Like, why do my eyes report that it's straight when in fact, why do my eyes report that it's bent when it's straight? Maybe my eyes are fucked. like, this realization is so important because so much of scientific materialism is premised on, or physicalism is premised on, the validity of physical senses. Like, most of our science we do with our physical senses. And even if we use laboratory equipment like microscopes, what are they but an extension of our physical senses? If we're using a telescope or a microscope, we're still depending on what we can see. Like, observation is one of the key means, upayas we would say, methods of the scientific approach. And if you say that the eyes can lie to you, that's damning. That's actually really problematic because your foundation for truth claims in the scientific world is facts of experience based on observation, but you're using your sense organs to conduct that observation. And if your sense organs are like sometimes not telling the truth, that should be taken quite seriously. So what Descartes argues is that like there are cases where my eyes deceive me, like the stick bent in water. But what about mirages? There's so many cases of optical illusions, and we don't need that many. We just need one. One case of an optical illusion, if we're going to be honest, is enough to throw doubt on the whole picture. Like, you're able to like question the whole thing because the whole thing is based on your senses reporting to you reality. But if there's even one case of your senses not doing that, then you can question any time your senses have ever reported anything to you. Like, if you lied about the stick, bro, like, how do I know you're telling the truth about the dick? I don't know. How do I know you're telling the truth about this or that? Like, if you lied once, that's enough for me to question the senses from now on. So the tongue, the skin, the nose, the eyes, the ears, especially the eyes. Like, there are optical illusions or auditory illusions. There's all these ways in which touch can be deceiving. Like phantom limbs. Like, oh my God, like the whole thing is way more complicated than we thought. And all of that you can immediately understand when you look at the way Ernest Rutherford is updating Dalton's view. It's like I feel the table to be a thing. For Aristotle, that was enough to call it a basic thing, like a building block. It's a substance. According to Aristotle, the table, the tree, like this is what the world is made of. Which, by the way, is him disagreeing with his guru. Because Plato presents the opposite view, that like the substance of the universe is like transcendent, actually. It's like these platonic forms that exist in this ideal realm, and this world is but a shadow of that realm. A view that the Neoplatonists would really take to town, and like a lot of Christianity is based on that Platonism and Neoplaton, like 2nd century Alexandria type shit, right? So it's interesting that Aristotle flips the script and he's like, no, I don't know about ideals. Like, I don't know whether or not those forms exist in some like supernal realm, and this is like the shadow horse of the idea. I don't know any of that. Like, I just know that there's a table here, there's a rock here, there's a tree here, and this is real enough. So Aristotle's taxonomy of things, calling us featherless bipeds, his like logic systems, the syllogisms that he formulates, like a lot of this is the foundation for Western culture, civilization, and reasoning. So we do science based on this Aristotelian worldview almost, which is less arguably mystical and religious than his predecessor Plato. And that's an important point, that we take this world as more real than any conjecture of a hereafter or a heaven or something transcendent. So with Aristotle's view, it's simpler. It's like, okay, I can feel it. It's a thing. This is more real than like a form. But then when you actually study the thing, using your senses, using valid experimental means, you quickly realize that, like Descartes realized with the stick, maybe it's more complicated than that. Maybe what I'm feeling to be solid is in fact mostly empty space. At least though, there's some way to like, account for electrons being there and creating this sort of like thing. They're in the mass of the atom, it's mostly protons and neutrons, but electrons aren't negligible. They're there. So maybe I'm touching something. I'm mostly empty space, but in that space, electrons are moving. Now notice, just like Dalton is looking at large bodies, like, the sun or whatever, and making claims about small things based on large things. And by the way, we know that's not kosher anymore because Newtonian and Einstein, we now understand that the physics that we use for big things is sometimes different than the physics that we use for small things. Back then, they thought that, the big things and the small things, you could kind of use the same physics. There's only one physics, which, by the way, during Isaac Newton's time was a kind of philosophy, natural philosophy. It's not yet experimental science using mathematical models. It's just people looking at the world and trying to make sense of all this shit, right? Like it's a philosophical inquiry into reality that's not necessarily premised on religion, though it's sometimes influenced by it, as we see with Isaac Newton and whatnot. Many of these people were way more involved with religion and spirituality than we give them credit for, especially with Isaac Newton. I think he's a classic example of being taken out of context, because many of his arguments were actually used to prove God and like talk about magic and stuff. And even Kant has this interesting mystical side where it's crazy, but this guy, the paragon of Western reason, like basically like Spock. Right? The first time I've made a Star Trek reference, it's for Viranatha exclusively. But basically the ultimate embodiment of pure reason. This guy like did have views on Mercurians or Martians and like they're like beings that he would talk about. It's interesting. A lot of them were way more mystical than we understand because that was their personal and private lives, and even when it was part of their writing, it's not the part that we like to think about in this hyper-rational sort of Charvaka materialist world that we live in. Skeptical world, which is good. Again, it's not a bad thing to be skeptical, as we'll soon see. So what we get here, this is very interesting, what we get is this at least saving grace that the electron is there and has some kind of maybe stuff to it. And here we are touching a table, and maybe that's what I'm feeling. Now, the physics that we're doing with the big things and the small things leads us maybe to claim that the electrons, like planets orbiting a gravitational center, just like that, the electrons are part of an orbital. And so they can be neatly arranged in this way, like a certain element, based on the Lavoisier kind of understanding of elements, will have a certain number of orbitals. And like basically what a thing is just however many orbitals it has or whatever. Like that determines like the way it interacts with other things. So before we thought there were 5 basic elements. The Tanmatras are subtle, and the Panchabhutas, like these are using Sankhyan terms, but like you'll see that every culture has had this understanding of reducing materiality to something, but usually it's to things like elements, like earth and fire and water, and but by these elements they don't necessarily mean literal earth. They mean the principle of earth or the principle of fire. Like these are basic physical building blocks. And now Anton Lavoisier, he's like complicating the picture by giving a much more complex table of things. And now what determines where you are on that table are things like how many orbitals you have and whatnot. So That explains the way that these atoms interact with other atoms. So now you get this relational view. Remember earlier I said there's already this complex triadic view of the atom where there's protons and electrons setting up this polarity of static and dynamic, which you can see is present front and center in the Shaiva tradition with Shiva and Shakti, and like the understanding of reality as being a kind of polarity rooted in oneness, and that oneness maybe is a neutron, the third, the reconciling principle. All that is available, but all of that is still a discussion about the atom. Now we have to have a discussion about atoms and other atoms, which is exactly what happens in Buddhism. In like the first phase of Buddhism, it's only a question about this anu, this discrete particle. What am I? And then in Mahayana Buddhism, which we'll then call the Theravadan people the Hinayanas, because they're only interested in the self. Like the Mahayanas will say, well, look at the world. What's this? Like instead of just being obsessed with your own liberation, the Buddha also taught compassion. What about Mahakaruna? Like what about other beings? How about them? Like don't you want to teach them the inherent emptiness of the self? And so the Mahayana view is considered Mahayana, great, because it takes up the question of all this. Whereas the Hinayana, which, by the way, the Theravadins won't use because it's sometimes used pejoratively. The word Hinayana means the small view. It's not necessarily pejorative. It just means like, the view of the atom. And thus far, in physics, again, do you see how it's mirrored? The process of studying the atom. You can see there are like parallels to the march of historical ideas within Indic spiritual traditions. It's remarkable. So everything is the beauty of Shaktism is that you see like everything is connected. And that's the claim we're making. That we can get God without ever having once used the word. It's just a matter of like understanding what it is that we're referring to beyond the complex terms that we use with all the cultural baggage and misunderstanding that these terms are likely to bring. Okay, so coming back to this question of how atoms relate to other atoms is really exciting. And the orbital theory is wonderful because it explains a lot of that. Like how this atom combines with this other atom to create this compound. Like wonderful. The orbital theory, just till this very day, people are learning it in school. Except, like I said last week, again, it's way more complicated. So, swarupam tvadiyam na vindanti devaha, right? Like, the more we study matter, the less of it we know. Because who is there? Not even the gods can understand her true nature. We learn in one Sanskrit hymn to Kali. It's like, maybe even Kali is matter. That's true for Kali in matter. Like, the more we try to understand matter, the more inscrutable it becomes. Like, we were joking last week, matter is Ma is there. And if Ma is there, the more you look at her, the more you realize you cannot confine her to this simplified understanding. She's not static, she's dynamic. So the moment you think you have her, she's already stepped away from you. Right? That's Kali. The image of Kali is she's always moving. That's why I get very, somewhat annoyed, I shouldn't say very annoyed, but somewhat annoyed when people make these claims about Kali's feet. Oh, if her right foot is forward, therefore she's Dakshina Kali or Saumya Kali. Or if her left foot is forward, she's therefore Smashana Kali and is dangerous and can't bring her into our house. And like, Kali is Kali Baba. And the thing is, to say that right leg, left leg is to kind of not understand the philosophy of Kali, which is the philosophy of dynamism. It's not like she's standing with one leg forward. We sometimes call it the Pratyalida posture or something. But like, she's walking, she's dancing, she's moving. So right now, her right foot might be forward, but just give her a moment and the left foot will be forward. That's what time is. Ma Kali's march, her dance. And so the dynamism of Kali makes it very difficult for us to understand Kali, because the moment you try to pin her down, she moves away from us, which is exactly our experience of matter. So if you're going to be an honest physicalist, an honest materialist, you can already come to these conclusions about the absolute nature of reality based on what you're seeing in your experimental procedure. Matter gets complicated the more you look at her. It's harder to understand the more you try. And the closer you look, the more nuance there is. And it's our simplified understanding that locks things into fixed structures that we think we can control. But the more we look at things, we realize, my God, these were projections. Even my senses are not accurately conveying to me what I think is there, much less my mathematical and theoretical and experimental models, which are based off of those senses. And even my reasoning is based off of my senses. And that reasoning is leading me to simplify a reality. There's a great temptation to simplify reality. Because to understand reality is, in one sense, to control it. But notice, when we actually honestly try to do this, try to understand reality, the more we look at matter, the less of it there seems to be. And the less order, and the less structure, and the less certainty there seems to be. That's thrilling, right? You can imagine this being a very spiritually rewarding process for a truly, truly honest materialist to realize that the world is way more complicated than their senses lead them to believe. Way more complicated than their mathematical, theoretical, and experimental models lead them to believe. Wow. Can you imagine the humility and the character that you can develop from doing this? But we don't do this. We go on the internet, or we like listen to our teachers, and we get this hubris about science, and we say, oh, your ghosts don't exist, your gods don't exist, science exists. But the basis for which you're making that claim is as religious and as stupid as the most like unthinking religious person. You just believe it because somebody told you. It's just your book. I mean, your invisible force is gravity. Your saint is like Richard Dawkins or some shit, and that person's invisible force is God, and their saint is, I don't know, Augustine or something. It's like, is it really that different? It's different churches. And it's, again, the same issue of saying my way is right and your way is wrong, which we'll see how we can address through today's discussion. One of many discussions we've had today. I should back up. I want to do a few things like today. I know I'm getting involved in this like really, I'm excited about this, but this really intricate story of the atom and of matter and the journey of matter into no matter. Into mind. I'm actually walking you through a history of ideas, showing how even in Western physical materialism, we're moving away from physicalism and towards a kind of idealism. Today is a very nebulous concept and has been for quite a few days. So even last night, like there was no moment when yesterday ended and today began, and that sounds like it's gonna happen again, especially for those of you on the East Coast. I'm glad you're with me, Sam, here at the end of all things. It does feel like that sometimes. Anyway. Never thought I'd die fighting by the side of an elf. How about by the side of a friend? Anyway, it's 2 a.m. We're allowed to be a slightly more unhinged version of ourselves. And that's always true. We always have that permission, but especially now, Ma's hours. Yeah, and Sona's about to go to work. Fuck, we started this discussion last week. Like, yesterday. I said last week. What? Might as well be it last week at this point. But notice, time is complex also, because we have this idea about 3 p.m., but what the fuck is 3 p.m.? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck is 3 p.m.? The sun rises, the sun sets. And then we have sundials and things, and we project onto reality this scheme. But maybe, like, when we study time, and we get very, very concerning results. Like, you know, McTaggart, his theory, the A theory of time. That's not the dominant theory in some places. Like, it's the B theory, which is the claim that there is no progression of time. It's all everywhere happening all at once. That's a remarkable idea that like everything is already kind of there, and that's why you can maybe explain things like backward causality. We don't need to get into it. There's a very complex quantum mechanics that I don't understand and that I've not read literature for, but my kind of pop science understanding of it, which I have to acknowledge is superficial at best. Like, it takes more than reading Michio Kaku's God equation to like make claims like this. I know, but that's all I did. So like, I just want you to know, like, don't take these claims too seriously. I'm not talking about the things that I have any business talking about. Like, just like exploring things from again with a disclaimer and some humility here from my outsider understanding of this tradition, because it is a tradition. It is a lineage, a parampara, and I have not been initiated into it, having not really studied it. So we should be careful and reverent, I think. Anyway, coming back to this with as much reverence as possible, what I want to do tonight is I want to like explore physical materialism with you a bit more and show how, if properly understood, if honestly understood, it is indeed no less religious or no less spiritual than any other spiritual tradition. You get the same non-dual claim. You get the same oneness and the same innate divinity. You get Ma, you get Shakti, you get devotion actually, if you honestly take up materialism. That's the project we did last week, and I want to review that a little bit right now. But the real project that we did, like not the real project, the project of the lecture, can atheists be spiritual? The real question was something like, how would we include people who didn't like God in the world of spiritual inquiry? Like I explained earlier, it's like there's so many traditions, and sketching them out was so productive, I think, and liberating to know that you're totally welcome whether or not you believe in God. It's not even that important. But interestingly enough, the third thing that I thought I would do today is like add even more flavor and nuance to all of this by just like considering the axiological implications of things like physicalism. Like, for instance, if I believe the whole world is made only of matter, then what will I do with my life? Probably try to acquire as much of that matter as possible. You know, I would probably live materialistically. So materialism is not necessarily the claim that I'm going to be materialistic. It's like materialism is the claim that there is actual physical matter, material, that exists objectively independently, but it leads to materialism, the idea that like I should base my life on those things like money and whatnot, which by the way is not even a material. It's just an abstract projection onto matter, as we'll see in a few moments. Like you get perfect renunciation from true materialism, but then going from that to like hedonism, as Sonoma was asking about earlier. Because like, what is it about matter that I like? Oh, its ability to please me. So I don't want my car unless it's pretty, unless I like looking at it, or unless I like driving in it. Or like, why would I be attracted to another body? Well, because this body, which is made of matter, is biologically determined to be attracted to that body, which is made of matter. And all my psychological and sociological conditioning makes me think that I will have some pleasurable experience if I rub this meat suit up against that one. So hence, I should do that. Like, that's what my life should be about. Like, and food, like, I should eat, and it's delicious and keeps me alive, but also I like it. It's like the things that are good for my body in terms of survival and reproduction, which every single cell, like unicellular amoeba also experiences, is kind of complicated for humans, because for us it's not just about survival and reproduction. It's all our psychological and philosophical and like cultural and sociological overlay. It's all of our conditioning and I guess you'd say culturing around that basic urge to survive and reproduce. And so like the pleasure and the joy that I get from meeting those basic needs of surviving and reproducing mean that maybe I should give my life to the process of just Epicureanism. Like, I should be an Epicurean in the sense that I want to eat good foods only, and live my life in a way that I can have the money to eat at good restaurants, or I want to go on vacations and see pretty things, or I want to be in a position where I can have lots of sexual opportunities, mating opportunities. And maybe I realize like, no, there's like something deeper here. My mammalian brain, my reptilian brain wants to fuck, but my mammalian brain wants deep connection and friendship, and like, and then we realize like, oh well, maybe what it means to be a hedonist is much more complex than I thought. Like, maybe Epicurus is not telling us to go out and eat at fine restaurants and like get rickety wrecked. Like, he might be saying, commit yourself to humanitarian causes. You know what I mean? Like, there's like very refined ways to derive pleasure in the world, but ultimately hedonism is the pursuit of that which makes me feel good, and arguably that's the guiding principle in my life, which we in the tantric world actually have much sympathy for, as you'll see in a few moments. I can't guarantee that that will come before the sun rises for you, though, because there's not much I need to cover. So we'll just start with this. That, like, today I want to do this. I want to talk about materialism and the hedonism that naturally comes from it. And then, and this is interesting, the nihilism that sometimes comes from that hedonism. So if you read Oscar Wilde's book, A Picture of Dorian Gray, you see a perfect hedonist, a person who's like sensually involved and like refined in their appreciation, their aesthetic appreciation of the sensual world. But notice, there's a futility to it. Like, and this is the claim of the ground level claim of Eastern spiritual traditions, that the world, it ain't shit. And the reason it's not going to quench your thirst is because it's a mirage. Like, you'll soon learn from the Eastern traditions that you're looking for satisfaction in something that doesn't even exist. It's a void. It's an illusion. It's a mirage. The idealistic traditions of Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta offer profound theories as to why the world doesn't satisfy you. It's like trying to drink from a mirage. It just won't do. It's like trying to eat a picture of a burger or something, a holograph of a burger. It's not going to satisfy you because ultimately it's not even there. But anyway, that's an extreme claim, a beautiful claim, a claim that I love talking about. It's so profound and so freeing, because then you realize that your project, which was premised again on physicalism, on materialism, your hedonistic project, the reason it's leading you to despair and to a sense of like listlessness and lethargy is because it's misguided. It's premised upon a wrong reading of reality. No wonder you're not getting what you wanted. Like, you went to a place expecting that you'll find something there, but that place doesn't exist, and the thing you're looking for is not there. And therefore, usually Buddhism comes to the rescue, or Advaita Vedanta comes to the rescue, after you've lived this, like, materialistic life of pursuing the car and the bar and the house and the mouse and, all of that. Like, you do that for a while, and then you become... You're Lana Del Rey in your next album talking about Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, you experience the whole spectrum of what fame and wealth and drugs can offer you. Like, you just go through the whole process of pleasure and joy, and you donate to charities. You can go on the whole philanthropic trip also, and that's great. But ultimately, you might still feel empty. And that's where Buddhism arguably begins. After you've resolved all forms of suffering in your life, one form of suffering is left, an existential angst, which even Sartre wanted to talk about. Like, a lot of these French existentialists, like Camus and Sartre, they were willing to like ask these questions like, why is there this basic underlying feeling that like I'm not okay? What's that about? Even though I might have everything like in life that you could want. I have all the material that I want. I have the house that I want. I have the spouse that I want. I have the mouse that I want. But why don't I feel okay? Like, what's missing? And then we can just go on this material quest again and again and again, and we're just not getting it. And then we become desperate, and then our material quest becomes like weird, right? Like it's like the things that would titillate you now are so far removed than what would titillate you then, and then like that kills you eventually. You OD or something, or like you get into trouble or something. You break the laws and you do weird things, and like it's weird. It's like it's gone awry, as it were. But then, if you ask this question, why am I not satisfied after all this materialism? That's when Buddhism can come in and say, well, there's an existential angst. It's called dukkha. It's a fundamental, like, innate sense of suffering premised upon your assumption of permanence in an impermanent world, in an impermanent world. So even if you don't take Buddhism in its most idealistic sense, and by the way, Buddhists can be realist too, even if you like want to interact with these things more naively, you don't have to say like they're all illusion or void. You can just say they're all impermanent. That's a remarkable discovery, actually. It's a huge insight that everything I want will eventually go away. Nobody likes to think about this. And yet, it's the one thing that the Eastern traditions offer right up front. Like the first thing they'll tell you is like, everyone you love, you're gonna die. That's the first thing you have to remember in order to do like philosophy. You have to remember death, this Stoic memento mori idea, or this like Socrates, like Plato quotes Socrates as having said, philosophy is preparing for death. Or was that Plato? Maybe Plato might have said that. I don't know. Socrates, who knows if he historically existed? I think he did, but who knows? This idea though that like philosophy is practicing for death, or like that we have to memento mori, like that's a religious idea, because a lot of religion is premised upon the question of like, oh my God, what happens after death? And the assumption that there is life after death is what religion is premised on. Like most religions are premised upon that. And what you do in religious life is for that, not for this. Having decided that that is more valid and more eternal maybe than this, which comes and goes. So there's impermanence. Of course, in Western civilization, there's this like underlying idea of impermanence with Stoicism, with like various things. But it's in the Eastern tradition, it's like this is the thing that's most emphasized in almost all the forms of Eastern spirituality. It's like the world, even if it's considered to be real, is not considered to be satisfying. There's something more satisfying than this world. And arguably, that claim becomes very convincing to someone who has tried. So coming back to the example of the person who's born in a church or born in a religion, they might be told that the world ain't no thing. Like you're not going to be satisfied out there. Like there's an eternal life in heaven, and you should go to heaven, and there you'll have all the things you want. Like it's not here that you'll have fun. But you don't know that yet for yourself. And so the whole thing becomes kind of repressive, because you're like a young person looking at the world, which feels way more real to you than this dusty book called the Bible, and like telling you about some heaven or something. Like this seems real. I can smell my crush's hair, and like one whiff of my crush's hair is like, who cares about heaven at that point? That's more real than the concept of heaven. So there's a beautiful line in Byron, Don Juan. It says like, so he's studying astronomy, right? He's like reading a book. And so it says something like an astronomer who turns away from his book and often to the skies, so it was with Don Juan and Donna Julia's eyes. This idea of like your books become insipid, your concepts become meaningless compared to Donna Julia's eyes. And like that's what the world is. It's like this beautiful like living reality, and like you're told by your pastors who are like wheezing, like sickly, like people like that, like the afterlife is more important, and that you should forego all of this to lead a life of purity and whatnot to get the afterlife rewards. Like delayed gratification without any certainty that there is even that gratification at the end of all of this. So what will you bank on? I mean, like as a person who hasn't experienced the world, it would be absolutely ridiculous and unreasonable for you to just take on faith a claim that you cannot verify, that even your pastor cannot verify, that even the book cannot verify, because it's not interested in verifying it. It's just claiming it, and often in a language that you never read. Like you're reading a translation, an interpretation at best of a claim that doesn't even make a theological and philosophical defense of itself. It just claims that there's an afterlife, and like you just have to go with it, and I don't think that's a very philosophically reasonable thing to ask of anybody, to like choose that delayed gratification with no certainty based on concepts in some book that you don't really even understand, that neither even your religious authorities understand, to go with that as opposed to Donna Julia's eyes, and so if you haven't experienced the world, oh my God, the obvious thing to do, I wouldn't say right, but the obvious thing to do, the reasonable thing to do, would be to go and see if the world has anything to offer you. And so hence the idea of a Rumspringer. There are many, like even St. Augustine saying, take away my lust, but not just yet. Like that's something that the Catholic tradition used to respect. Like this idea of like, no, it's not until a soul has really truly experienced the world that they can then have a conversion experience and come to God. Because it's not until you see how empty the world is, how much suffering there is in the world. It's not until then that you come to God. It's not a fear of hell, arguably, that brings you to God. Although that's the narrative that many churches today will use, because fear is a good tool for control. It's not the fear of hell, really. It's the realization of meaninglessness or emptiness, which arguably is best had by the wealthy and by the successful. Some of the greatest saints in the Catholic tradition, a lot of them started out like rich, noble people in Rome or something. They had everything. Like, think of St. Francis. Rich kid, aristocratic, like heir to great fortune, whose father is respected, and he is kind of a playboy, like hedonist with his friends, like just doing the things that you as an Italian noble would do, right? Like ride horses and fence and hit on girls and stuff. And then he has his conversion experience. So arguably it's only people like that who really arguably will come to God, having sensed the futility of the world. So notice what I'm doing here. I'm pointing out that the Western tradition and the Christian and Abrahamic traditions and the Eastern traditions are really not that different. It's just that the Eastern traditions, it seems like, have really emphasized this impermanence point way more. So the first thing you learn is that everyone will die, you will die. And the question then is, if everything is impermanent, what did I expect to get here? I mean, am I surprised that the thing that I got is no longer with me? Or am I surprised that although I have that thing that I coveted and craved my whole life, I'm no longer the person who thought that it was good? Like, I changed, or it changed. Either way, its ability to please me is gone. I thought $10,000 will do it, but now I need another abstract number on my screen, 100,000 or something. It's like, eventually you'll realize there's some emptiness to all of this. It's possible that you, Ernest Rutherford, looking at the emptiness of the atom, it's possible that you can realize it then also. Like, I can't eat this. It's not going to satisfy me because it's mostly just fucking empty space. And that is the beauty of the hog plum argument. Look, it sounds like a 2:30 in the morning cracked out thing to say. But like Sri Ramakrishna would often talk about, okay, I'm not on crack. Like, I say these things and people are like, aha, caught him. He's on drugs. You guys, like, this is me fucking sober. Like, I drank black tea, like, chill. And people are like, oh my God, he's up all night. That must mean he's like, dude, chill. It's like, no, this is just me. But the claim here, and this is going to sound like a cracked out claim. I'm totally like, I think in my right mind as I say this, but I don't know that I've ever been in my right mind a day in my life. And if the right mind is a pursuing of money and whatever the fuck that people are doing out there, I don't want that mind. But this is a weird claim. Sri Ramakrishna would often talk about the hog plum. And that's like a thing that we don't really know about. It's like a kind of fruit which looks really tasty. That's the thing about a hog plum. It's appealing. But when you bite it, you find that there's no real flesh there. It's mostly just skin and seed. That's the trick of the hog plum. You bite it, it's like, ugh, that's not what I thought I was going to get. But it looked so juicy and good. I expected it to be sweet and it didn't really taste sweet. And not only that, it, I think, causes some kind of acid reflux or something. There's some kind of physical reaction you get from eating the hog plum. So something that looks good is in fact not good. But you only really know that by trying it. This is important. Sri Ramakrishna would often, again and again, say, I never tell people not to enjoy the world. I never tell people to like renounce the world. I tell them to eat the hog plum, to go and experience the world. And then, if they decide that they don't like it, and he knows that they will, they'll come back here for the cure, he says. In other words, you won't be interested in Sri Ramakrishna, and nor should you be interested in Sri Ramakrishna and what he has to say until you first go and taste the hog plum. So presumably, if you're there at the feet of the master learning about spirituality, it's because you sense in those words and in that life something higher and deeper and nobler than what you had before. But you only know that through trial and error. It's a true scientific method that we're encouraging here. In all forms of spirituality, I think even in the best forms of Western spirituality, it's still the same. The idea that you have to go out, experience the world, and then have this conversion experience, which doesn't necessarily have to be about grace or anything. It could just be like this recognition that I think there's something more to life than all of this. And so the hog plum example is about something that looks fleshy, looks like it has stuff, but then doesn't. Isn't that just like the atom? It looks like it's full of stuff. It feels like it's full of stuff. But when you actually look closely, when you actually experimentally look at it, it's not full of stuff. Oh my God, so okay, good luck. I'll be here. I'm at work, I guess. My work is this place, so like I've clocked in, so I can't clock out. It's like, it's Hotel California, I can't check out. Jaima, thanks for hanging out. So this idea, like, it's interesting, this parallel between Sri Ramakrishna describing the hog plum as being full of stuff and then ultimately disappointing you, and this idea of like looking at the atom and realizing, oh my God, what I thought was full of stuff is really just empty space. No wonder it's not as tasty as I thought. It's all just skin and seed. I better spit it out. Like, you could have that realization looking at matter, realizing its emptiness. Then and there you could realize it. Right? And it's a beautiful thing to think about, that even materialism offers the same insight if we understand what we're looking at. And what is materialism or physicalism but the philosophical reasoning we do around what we see. And what we're seeing now, we have reason to doubt just because we saw the stick and the bent stick, all that. So anyway, assuming my senses aren't lying to me, assuming my experimental models work, assuming math is true, which Gödel cast doubt on in 1930s with his incompleteness theorems. That's worth a read. I read that paper, and I didn't read Cantor, but I had someone very brilliant explain Cantor to me, and it was somewhat reasonable to see how Gödel uses Cantor's like set theory, which is only one of many possible mathematics. He's using set theory to prove that those axioms in mathematics are themselves not ultimately provable. Kant does something similar with his antimonies, right? So the idea is like maybe even math doesn't work. Right? And last week I talked about how something could be instrumentally true but not actually true. Like you could use a particular model to predict where Halley's Comet is, but that doesn't actually prove that the model is a true depiction of reality. Just because it works doesn't mean it's true. So the view of pragmatism is the view that if it works, it's true. Which is good enough for most people. But like arguably, like no, it could be just a correlation, it could be a coincidence that your theory just somehow happens to like work when it comes to predicting where Halley's Comet is going to be, but it doesn't mean that your theory about the universe is true, just because it has predictive power. And once you throw in all this like quantum entanglement stuff, and when you throw in, the quantum Copenhagen, like, when you throw in all this like participatory universe stuff, which we'll talk about later, like it gets really complicated because maybe the model is causing you to experience reality in that way. It's not that the model is accurately depicting reality, nor is it even working in predicting where Halley's Comet is. It's just your belief in that model might be coding for a reality in which there's a confirmation bias. Like, of course you're going to see what you were looking for. Maybe that's the nature of reality, that it presents to you for your viewing pleasure, that very thing which you projected that it has. So like, that's the thing. Pragmatism is like enough for people. It's like, if I can predict Halley's Comet, that's enough for me, which shows you something, right? It shows you that our quest is not a quest for knowledge, it's a quest for control. It's good enough for us because what we want is we want for things to work. Like what we want is for the lights to turn on when I hit the switch. We want nature to work for us. We don't need to see her for what she is. That's the way we treat women. We look at women, it's like, I don't need to know you. I don't even want to have a conversation with you. I just want to project onto you like what I think you are, and I just need it to work. Like, I need this relationship to work. I need to do my dishes. Or like, notice the problem here? The way we do science is not at all with integrity, right? Is that crazy? It's like the whole thing is premised upon this gross animal desire for safety and survival, and this violence to like get things to provide for me. It's like we criticize religion for saying we are the center of the universe, right? Like we say, the religion claims that we're the center of the universe. But what about animals? But we're the very same people that then put them all in like these factories and things like that. There's just this comfort to it, right? There's like this idea of like safety and comfort, which all comes from control. We don't want our women to speak up. We don't want them to have a problem when we frack them for oil like that. Like, it's remarkable, but the way that we do science, I think, Jamie, you hit the nail on the head here. It's like the way that we do science as Western culture is the same way that we preach religion, with sword, with violence, with great aggression, because of fear. There's a need to control. Like, and the more you do this materialism, arguably the more fear you have, and arguably the more aggressive your materialism becomes, until somebody's like hovering a hand over a red button that will launch the nukes or something like that. And it's like why are we doing this project? And immediately we realize that if something is true because it works, it's good enough for us. It shows us that we're not actually trying to like read nature for what she is. We're trying to like read into nature what we want, so we can like have some semblance of, if not control, at least the illusion of control, which is comforting, right? So, and again, it's like even like honest scientists, and most of us aren't. Most of us just accept scientific claims because they feel safer than religious ones, and I think that's wise of us. But like even honest scientists, like that are actually doing the work, that are there in the labs, looking in the instruments, like even they sometimes don't understand that this is why they're doing what they're doing. Maybe for grant money or some shit like that, or get a Nobel Prize. But like in one sense, like a lot of times, they're looking for something that will work, but not necessarily something that's true. And just because it works doesn't mean it's true. And that like little lacuna between the link between working and it being true, like that could like wreck all of science for a person who like really took these things very seriously, was sensitive to these kind of logical things. Anyway, coming back to this, it's like, okay, so we have this view that there is this objective world, and there are these atoms and things are flowing around neat orbitals, and we have this like comforting view of like orbitals, and atoms are gonna go around the orbitals because that's what planets do around big gravitational mass. It's like that's what happens. It's like you just get this natural orbital, and like things move in that orbital, and that gives us a sense of safety. And notice it's reminiscent of Aristotle's thing. Like there's like this idea of like spheres and different levels, and so you can see the older, more classical ideas, Greek ideas, even ancient ideas, reasserting themselves here, almost as if to suggest that we read the world in terms of our mind, and it's the same mind looking at the same world, so you're going to get the same ideas again and again in different forms, right? Is it wonderful to think that the Western world, the Eastern world, they might use different language, like we were discussing earlier with Salvatore, like the idea of Brahman and Kali and Shiva. It's like these are all just readings on reality, but isn't it the same mind reading the same reality? As such, you're likely to see the same patterns, literally the same images of like circles, concentric circles, as a description of the universe. So again, Aristotle's view is back, and here it's in the atom. It's the minutest particle that has his view. Jaima. I know, right? Isn't it crazy? This is what Swamiji does to us. Like we stay up all night talking about God because of Swami Vivekananda. Oh my God. Oh, arise awake. Good morning. This happened all the time, by the way, in Bellarmine. They would just like stay up all night, talk about God, debate free will and determinism. It's wonderful. This atmosphere, highly intellectually refined but spiritually charged. Oh my God. You can live in it. How energizing, how ennobling, as opposed to all the other kinds of things that we're used to. So this thing, out of pleasure, we do this. I know that's the thing. I know that's the, it's like, that feeling of, I should. And yes, please, do what's sensible and wonderful. Please, Jaima. I'm getting to something. It's all recorded, so don't even worry about it. So coming back to this, if I'm looking at atom and I'm seeing that there are these orbitals, like I can still kind of convince myself that there's something to it, right? That it's there. So I might not have this like Buddhistic or like I don't even want to call it Buddhistic. It's like, yeah, isn't it wonderful? It's exciting. Me too. I feel very lucky. It isn't necessarily, you don't have to call it Buddhistic. Advaita Vedantic. It's like whatever. All religions, Christian, like Islamic, like every religion in the world comes to this conclusion: the world ain't shit because there's something better, right? But like, you only understand that when you realize the world can't give you what you're looking for. It's possible to have that realization at Ernest Rutherford, but you can maybe opt out of having that realization because you have the Niels Bohr model and their orbitals, and like that gives you still a sense of matter, and then things get really problematic. And this is what they don't teach us in physics, introduction physics classes in school or whatever, like high school. You don't really learn this until maybe you get involved in physics in a real way, which I haven't ever done. So please take these next claims lightly. But from what I hear from outside the tradition is that like it's not even true anymore to say that these atoms are flowing around neat orbital lines. Instead, they're like P clouds or S clouds, or they call it bicycle theory. Like now it's really complicated because now it's like these atoms, they're mostly empty space, and within that empty space there are probabilities, and like the electron is now reduced to a probability. It's no longer a thing that flows around a neat orbital. Like it's no longer predictable. It's just probable, and therefore it's in one sense everywhere all at once and nowhere at any time. That's a paradox. Like there's a paradox to energy, to Kali. If Kali is dynamism, the more you look at her, you see the space is filled with a clear light, with an energy. And that energy is not at all moving in a way that you understand. Like at first you thought you could understand her. You looked at her and you said, she's moving in orbital lines. And she said, oh yeah? Watch this. And then it got complicated. Like the more you looked at it, you realize like the more disorder and chaos there was. Like we worship a god of chaos. You don't have to have a picture of Kali in your house to worship that goddess. Like you can look at an atom and you'll see chaos. And it's thrilling. I mean, the atom, oh my God. Like if we are that, if we are the atom, then we are free, as it were, to do exactly what everybody thought we wouldn't do, which is what atoms do all the time under close investigation. They just like fuck around. They just like do things that the scientists are like, oh! And if that's your fundamental nature, should you be surprised when you do the same thing? Your very stuff makes you do it. Like freedom is there within your very atomic structure. It's like it's inherent in the atom that there is some kind of chaos, and it's premised upon infinite probability. Like anything could happen anytime. That seems to be the fundamental nature of reality, and you get that from pure physicalism. It's like the atom has this probability cloud, a cloud of unknowing. A Christian mystic called it once. Of course, he was talking about God, and here we're talking about also God, although we're calling it an atom. So here we have this cloud of unknowing. At any time, anything could happen, and that's what an atom is. And notice now we're getting really scared because what's happened is we've taken a thing that was a thing, and now it's become less of a thing, and it's become more of a model. So notice what's happened in quantum mechanics. We're like moving from, atom to atom, you could say, but like, no, I wouldn't even argue. We're moving from like something really interesting here where it's like atom to Atman. I don't know, something interesting where it's becoming more idealistic. Why? Even though we consider ourselves physicalist and materialist working on scientific problems, notice the methods that we use now are increasingly theoretical. By the time you get to Einstein, of course, by the time you get to the early 1900s, like, oh, fuck, like, whoa, almost everything is mathematics. Like, almost every claim made about reality. Of course, there's experimental physics and they try to verify those mathematical models, but usually post the fact, like usually the mathematical model leads the way. Isn't that interesting? It used to be observation that led the way. And then we immediately realized that's not going to work because the more we observe, the less we know. And also, like, coming back to the basic Cartesian skepticism, it's like, I don't even know if my senses or my instruments are reporting accurately what I expect there to be. If the instrument is an extension of my senses, there could be a problem with the instrument. And more importantly, I already know there's a problem with my senses. So already I know, however refined my instruments are, and the instruments are continuously being improved upon, which shows you there should be a skepticism about instruments also. Like, all of this introduces so many lacunas, so many places in which I could have made an error. And therefore, I think with all humility, with all due respect, scientists do move away from physical observation, knowing that this world is way too refined, way too complex for even my instruments. So what are the instruments now? Computer software, mathematical models, like rendered into computer programs. But like, if not that, at least a whiteboard and a chalk. So what do we do now? We just think. We think and we use mathematics to do it. That's why 1930s Gödel incompleteness theorem is so scary. Like, incompleteness theorems has a chance, if you read it in a particular way, it has a chance of absolutely launching you into like a freak out. Like, if you take this the world of science seriously, if you take the models of reality that the world of science presents seriously, incompleteness theorems can bring all of that down like a house of cards because it's all based upon mathematics. And again, there are many different kinds of mathematics, and the fact that we don't even know that's scary to us, that we think mathematics is just set theory. Though that happens to be the dominant form of mathematics, it's but one way to do mathematics. Why? Because it all depends on what axioms you start off with. Mathematics is an a priori reasoning tool. It's just like we're doing mathematics right now. We're reasoning. It's just we're not symbolically reasoning. I mean, yes, we are. We're using words. It's just a different way of doing what mathematicians do, except they're trying to like do it in a way more abstract, conceptual way, arguably. So they're basically Spockifying themselves. They're trying to get to a place of pure reason, just like Kant. And the way they do that is by using symbolic logic and highly refined forms of logic. And we get to India, Navya, Nyaya. Oh my God. There has never been a logical system, I would argue, since Navya. I mean, like, maybe now there will be in the future, but like Navya, Nyaya, as far as we know, is kind of the best, most refined logic that we have. But math is logic, and we're using logic as a reasoning tool. But it's a priori, it's happening within, and we kind of make up our own axioms. And so, like, we say, okay, like, what is a triangle? A triangle is this, and we define it. And there might not be a perfect triangle in the world. We just have a concept. Again, Plato is back. Now, there are these ideal things called triangles. Like, again, notice what's happened? We've gone to the world because of Aristotle. We looked at it, and we took him seriously, and we're like, yeah, maybe the world is there. And then immediately we go back to Plato, although we won't admit it. We're not going to say they're ideal forms, like in that religious, mystical way that Plato and, like, the Neoplatonists do. But, like, isn't it so crazy, though? Like, isn't it so crazy that, like, more or less that's what we're saying when we posit the triangle? Like, geometry is a return to Plato because we're saying there's a perfect triangle. Where is there a perfect triangle? Or like in nature, for instance. And like, where is there a square? And these are all things that we've defined in an a priori mathematical. So what is a line? 2 dots. And what's a point? Like, all these things. These are the axioms that we use. Geometrical axioms. We use various other kinds of axioms, as far as I know. Again, I'm not a mathematician, but I am a logician in the Nyaya sense. So, like, coming to this point, maybe not in your Bertrand Russell sense, but in an Indian sense. And coming to this point, when it comes to Indian logic in this way, oh my God, like, if those axioms are wrong, the whole thing comes down. And that's what incompleteness theorem was able to prove. Like, he didn't prove them wrong, he just proved them unprovable. In other words, he at least casts a bit of doubt. That's all incompleteness theorems does. I think you can't push it beyond that. It shows that, like, our certainty in mathematics is maybe not as safe as we thought. That, like, there is reason to doubt the axioms upon which math is based. So we just kind of take it for granted that math works. And it works predictively sometimes. We can expect to find a black hole where our mathematical models tell us there will be one. And so when we look into a telescope, voila, It's where the math told us it would be. So math must work. But again, that doesn't mean it's an actual depiction of reality, and things are going to get really weird once we start looking at what happens with particle wave diffractions, right? Like, but anyway, coming back to this, before even Copenhagen influence, before Heisenbergian uncertainty, before any of that, before the 20th century, honestly, literally before the 20th century, like before everything went to like shit, right? Like before any of that, there was still this recognition that like math, like, and this of course is a very 20th century idea, but like math is like maybe worth questioning. And so you have, as early as the Greek times, mathematicians, philosophers questioning, are numbers real? Is there such a thing as two? Like if I have two books, is there a thing, like a thing called two? Plato would say yes, maybe. Someone else would say no. Leibniz would say like maybe it's like relational, whereas Newton might say it's maybe more substantival with regards to space. Like everyone has a different view as to whether space is a relational property or like a thing in and of itself. And like Kant thinks you can never understand the thing in and of itself, and like it's there but you'll never know that it's there. And like why even posit it if you can't verify it? Like all these like very interesting philosophical questions. But all that aside, like Gödel in the 1930s cast doubt on mathematics. But even if he didn't, here's my argument. Even if the axioms were perfectly flawless, notice math is something we do in our mind based on purely a priori models and ideas and logic entirely within a human mind. Like mathematics is a distinctly human way of interacting with reality. And when we like make this Pythagorean claim that the universe is like a story of numbers, oh my god, no, it's our story of numbers. I have no way of knowing that the universe is a story of numbers. Like I have no way of knowing that God's mind is a mathematical mind. Mine might be, but then I look at the universe, of course I'm going to read it in that way. It doesn't prove that the universe is like understood in terms of music or numbers or anything. It's just what I do and how I project. And so that's where it gets interesting with Copenhagen inference, considering my role in affecting the thing that I'm trying to observe, right? What? Okay, here's where we get really juicy, right? This is the juiciest thing. Notice, if you understand Sri Ramakrishna's hog plum metaphor, which arguably you can only understand through a very scientific and honest experimental method of trying to kiss Donna Julia. Right? Like, as the astronomer is more often to turn to the skies, so too with Don Juan and Donna Julia's eyes. So go out and like pursue the things that you love, and by doing that, you're conducting a like almost Marie Curie experiment. You can collect data using your observational powers of the senses and your reasoning faculty. You can educate yourself through experience. And Asha, welcome back. Missed you. We're still at it. I'm happy it's the kind of thing that you can go to like bed for and wake up to. I hope that's what you did. I hope you got some rest, because I know you were up all night. You know, I texted you at like 4 and you were like, what's up? It's like, fuck. Yeah, I know. I can't believe we're still on. What? Anyway, we're on to something, I think. I'm kind of excited. This is a cool direction to go in, and I'm glad you're here for it. Because hopefully you can see that with the Shakta worldview, it's like it really doesn't matter what you take up. Like literally take up an atom or take up a religious tradition, and both will lead you to non-duality, the innate divinity of the soul, and Ma. Like, why not? Study matter. Just study matter. Forget God. And Ma is there. Ma is there in matter. No, I know. It's good that we had like a Q&A first, right? Anyway. So, let's come back to this idea. If you took Thakur seriously, when he said, Thakur Sri Ramakrishna seriously, when he said the thing about the hog plum, it's just uncanny how similar his hog plum analogy is to, it's just uncanny how similar it is to Ernest Rutherford's kind of emptiness experience. Like that, the matter, the thing that's supposed to matter, maybe it doesn't matter because it's mostly empty. Like you can get to a Buddhistic kind of realization of emptiness without ever having interacted with the Nagarjuna, just by looking at matter honestly. Isn't that beautiful? The appeal of Eastern spiritual traditions is they don't make unnatural claims. They're making claims based on phenomenological data. Like you should be able to verify what we're saying right now, right here. And Ernest Rutherford is verifying it. Anyway, at least Niels Bohr and some of that stuff, like the orbitals. But look, you think Ma is moving in a way that you understand. And then look what happens. The moment you look at that empty space, you see that it's filled with energy, right? Like empty space is energy. It's the electrons that move in that empty space. And that Shiva is like not really even there. It's like mostly Ma. But then, if you understand protons and electrons in this way. But then notice, like in the orbital theory, you're so comfortable with the idea that you understand how Ma moves. Like we looked at orbitals, and we have a whole table. We put Ma in this like table, and we're like, look, if this atom has this many orbitals, it's called this, and when it interacts with that, it's called that. And we're so proud of ourselves because we have this Aristotelian taxonomy, and we're like, this is that, and this is this, and our language is like cutting everything up, and everything is discrete, and there are orbitals, and it's all making sense. And now we can finally control her and make her do what we want her to do. And the moment we think we can control this crazy woman, called nature, called Ma, called your friend, your spouse. Like, the moment you think you can control the woman, she immediately steps out from under you. She immediately obfuscates things. And that's what you can realize next, after realizing the emptiness of things, which explains why the world might not be satisfying. You don't even need impermanence for this. Like, emptiness is there in the atom. And like, why am I not getting any fulfillment? So I'm drinking water from a mirage, maybe. And I can see that. Experimentally, I can prove that. But then, it's not just that. There's a dynamism to reality, which is inherent in the atom, and it's like not at all what we thought. Because with the bicycle theory, P theory, S theory, we like realize it's just pure probability. Pure probability. Ma is chaotically available everywhere all at once or nowhere at any time. This is a crazy thing. Because we went from orbitals, we went from electrons moving in clearly like defined ways to what seems to be a mathematical model, to this experiment of anything could happen anytime and we don't really know where the electron's going to be. That's crazy. Like, now matter is not looking so good. It's scary, but it's, from a Shakta point of view, thrilling. It's thrilling because we're moved towards chaos, we're moved towards freedom, and we're moved towards possibility, infinite possibility. What is reality but a series of possibilities? Like, everything is nothing but infinite possibility. That's what the electron is proving to us in the bicycle theory, in the probability theory. But also probabilities have to do with math. And so I hope you can see this whole discussion we had on math. Even if you don't take Gödel seriously, right? Like, even if you don't think mathematical axioms are unprovable, even if you're like willing to accept that the a priori thing called mathematics that we humans uniquely do in our minds, so far as we know, is somehow supposed to map onto reality, even if you like reject the hubris of that claim. It's so crazy to me, right? Like, the same people who are upset with religion because they like privilege humans as the best, those same people will then say, oh, this mathematical a priori concept that I have in my mind, oh, this explains reality. Fuck you. This reality you think is explained in terms of numbers, just because you think in numbers, Pythagoras, doesn't mean this reality is explained in numbers. I reject your idea, point blank, that what you do in your mind somehow should naturally match to the, I mean, it does actually. He's right. He's right, but maybe not in the ways that we think. And we think that because we have math, and because we can predict where Halley's Comet is, and we don't care that, like, you know, that there's a discrepancy between instrumental truth and like actual truth. Like, because we don't care, because we just want to control nature and have it our way. Like, it seems like we're willing to just, after criticizing religions for privileging human thought, we're willing to then use human thought, mathematics, and think with full hubris and certainty that it says something about our world. How crazy. How absolutely crazy. Is it any wonder that like we're always on the brink of nuclear disasters and everyone's unhappy and like they're depressed and they have all the food and all the money and like it's just depressed and like because you're fucking lunatics. And it's all coming down to this hubris, this pride of thinking that mathematics somehow works. Alright, like, it didn't get you laid on your Tinder date. Like, chill. Like, it's not that good. Like, obviously, like explaining Takamura conjecture or something like that. It's not doing it for you in any of the ways that like you actually care about, you know. So like, the project of mathematics it's beautiful, it's ennobling, but it's entirely internal. It's entirely a priori. It's an idealistic process. It might not map onto reality in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that now in quantum mechanics, most of our theories are mathematical models, and then maybe later experimental models will come and verify them, that's telling, because it means we're moving away from Aristotle and back to Plato. Or in other words, we're moving away from physicalism and materialism. Even when we say we're physicalist, we're still moving away from the idea that matter is a thing. We just assume that it is, and now the way that we talk about it, check this out, is entirely a priori. I mean, what? Like, our entire understanding of reality is mathematics, and we think that that means that we understand reality. No, we've reduced reality to the mind. So, essentially, even physicalists and even materialists, if they take their tradition far enough, if they follow their logic to its conclusion, if they observe the history of ideas, and if they observe what's happening now, and arguably by the time that I finish this sentence, something's already changed, and everything I've said has been rendered like obsolete, right? Like that, it's moving at that pace, as it were, that everything I just said is probably true like 10 years ago, as any good quantum mechanics person will probably tell you. It's dated, like what I have now, like Michio Kaku God equation stuff, it's dated even. Like, yeah, this is cutting edge. Quantum foam and oh my god, this cutting edge stuff, and it's dated. That's crazy. Anyway, so back to this. We now have mathematical, a priori, reasoning, intellectual models for reality. And increasingly so. Increasingly so we describe reality in terms of math, which means the reality we're engaging with is no longer a reality that's out there, that's perceived by the senses, which we cast doubt upon a long time ago with Descartes, and which we have now reason to suspect that even our instruments don't properly represent. And that same world which we observed, which we saw with our senses, which we called material, which we called matter, we now only really think about mathematically. How beautiful that like we're back to this recognition that it's all in my head, that it's all in my mind, and the very ways in which I interact with it is entirely mental, entirely a priori. Wow. Now it gets better. It's way better now. Because in the 1900s, of course, it's a very beautiful time for physics. It's like a time of major upheaval for the world, and also a recognition that these things are powerful in a way that can be destructive. Right? It's like time of nuclear arms race and everything. It's a wonderful time to be alive. You really feel Ma. There's uncertainty, and there's power, and there's like this possibility of power destroying everything. I mean, it's just beautiful. This is Ma's like such a prominent display of Ma in the materialist sciences. It's just exciting and thrilling to see her there. Okay, so now what do we get in this period? We get the Copenhagen influence, which is so scary. Like the idea that the universe might not be a static something existing objectively and independently apart from me, which I can observe. It might be a dynamic something which is in dialogue with me that changes the moment I try to observe it, which is incredibly frustrating, because the only way science can work is if there is a thing that I can now observe and use a microscope and look at. But like if there's not a thing that's going to stay there and wait for me to take a picture, then how can I base my claims on anything? Because like it changes the moment I look at it. How then can I make any conclusions about it? It's exactly what we learned when we thought that the energy was moving along clear orbital lines. It isn't. It's just chaotic probability. Similarly, the universe is chaotic and dynamic in the sense that the more I try to understand it, the more it changes based on my understanding. It's almost like it's feeding me what I want to see. This idea of Sankhya saying that Prakriti is there to give us both Bhoga and Apavarga, that she's like gracious in this way, that she's responding to our needs and our desires and our wants, because in some sense, she's dancing for us. And it's Shiva and Shakti idea that will Prakriti Purusha later becoming Shiva Shakti idea, Shakti Shiva idea. Like here in science with Copenhagen inference, you're saying when I look at a particle, my looking at it does affect the way that it diffracts into waves. Like what it does when it approaches like the double slit or whatever. And again, there are YouTube videos for it. I'm not going to explain this because I can't. I don't know very much about it. I didn't even read the literature for it. I just again, I'm going off of a pop culture understanding of it. So forgive me. I want to be sensitive around these things, but I don't really know about these things. But here's my impression. From what I understand, like if I look at it, and the YouTube videos will do a better job of explaining it. But I look at it, like that changes my result, which is crazy because now we're understanding the universe as per Planck's definition is a participatory one, not an observatory one. And this leads Heisenberg to like talk about uncertainty, that there's some uncertainty about the world. I mean, like, how beautiful that if we really did science, if we really honestly did science, we realize how uncertain we are. And that's the liminality in which Kali dances, this uncertainty, where the mind is totally unhorsed and we don't find our ground. There's so many Vijnana Bhairava Tantra practices about this, like just anashayam or anadhisthana, like to meditate without any support or to feel like you're without ground, like you're like, to use Jogyamji's phrase, like falling through space without a parachute, but there's no ground. Like that feeling, it's a Kali feeling. And here you get it immediately upon understanding that the universe changes when I look at it. Like this participatory, not observatory. So Heisenberg uncertainty is a very important moment in physics because it's a moment of humility. It's weird to be so proud and so certain of a tradition that has things like Gödel's incompleteness, Heisenbergian uncertainty, and ultimately Einsteinian relativity. This shows you that matter is not a fixed something or other. It's a dynamic, constantly changing process that does not exist independently or objectively apart from us. At the very least, if you don't want to go so far as to say it's within us as us, at the very least, you have to say it's a dynamic process of dialogue. And now we're back to the Tantras. Like now we have Shiva talking to Shakti. It's like, it's not a thing that we study that exists divorced from us. It's a thing that we're intimately and intricately connected with. And I think there was a moment when a particular physicist is looking at something and he suddenly realizes, and this is huge, by the way, this is a religious breakthrough. This is an enlightenment moment. He realizes suddenly, with great delight, mind you, because all religious revelation comes with recognition, delight, and freedom. He realizes he's not at all separate from the thing that he's looking at. He looks at it and he's like, I am. This is what he said, right? These are the exact words that he said, I think, more or less. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to paraphrase it. I forget. I thought I remembered the quote. And I thought I remembered the scientist, but the name escapes me. It's been so long now. But a particular scientist, maybe somebody will find it out. Not important now, though. But he said something profound. He said, oh my God, I am the universe studying itself. Because in that moment, he realized that he was made of atoms. Which is funny because when we observe the universe, we objectify it and we try to like remove ourselves from the process. Like when Western academic institutions do anthropology. Is it Sagan? I don't think so. I think it's a quantum mechanics person, like somebody doing particle physics. Who's I think I don't know. But you're right. It's a very Sagan-y thing to say, right? Like it's a very pale blue dot thing to say. But it's this moment. It's not a moment of like humility, right? Like I think Carl Sagan, like what he's offering there is and I think he's said many things I think sounding like this. But I think the pale blue dot thing is the opposite of what's being said here. The pale blue dot kind of feeling is like a feeling of whoa, things are vaster than I ever thought they were. This is like kind of the opposite revelation, which is oh my God, I am vaster than I ever thought I was. Because I'm not just an insignificant thing in the insignificant pale blue dot. Like, no, the pale blue dot is not insignificant. By the way, that Carl Sagan claim goes very nicely with our kind of like materialism. Because we're like, yeah, if we really think about it, we're meaningless. Like, we're just a blip and like... No, that's not true. You are not meaningless. You are not a blip. This is so nice. This is the idea that, I'm nothing. I'm just a pale blue dot. The humility that comes from that is a humility that can be easily weaponized against you. It's a humility premised on weakness, a recognition of my smallness. Fuck that shit. You're not small. You are not a pale blue dot. In you, the thought of a pale blue dot occurs. In you, the thought of the entire universe, we haven't gone to that yet. This revelation, I think, and hopefully the other Carl Sagan quotes, like he's saying this I think is a much more ennobling idea. So I want to push back against this, like, I'm nothing but a blip in the canvas of reality idea, because what this person is discovering is something profound. Yeah, it's like that. We're like a way for the universe to know it's, I'm like, whoa, these are mystical claims. Like, these are scientists, respected scientists who are doing science in the approved Western ways, like non-theistic, like materialist, physicalist ways, and look what's happened. They've become mystics, babbling prophets who are marveling at beauty and who are experiencing deep inner fulfillment. Like, oh my God, they never once read a Bible. They never once did any meditation. And we're so proud of our meditation. Like, do we even meditate? Are we looking at ourselves the way a scientist looks at the atom? How dare we? How dare we look at science as spiritual people or as religious people and say that it is not a darshana? It breaks my heart to think that every day people are looking at Ma and we don't think they know anything about Ma because we call her Kali. And somehow the word Kali means that we know something about her that the person who calls her an Adam doesn't. This breaks my heart, that every day she's right there in front of us. And there are people, great people, who have given their whole lives to like studying it. These sadhus, can you imagine what they've sacrificed? They've sacrificed relationships and money. Like a lot of them refuse to take grants for projects that would have been profitable in order to look at Ma. To look at Ma in this way that only a sadhu knows how. Like a way that like ruins your life because you're in love with this thing and you don't even know why. And you just want to look at it all day. And what do you realize? She's wild. She's chaotic. She's more than you ever imagined. And then you realize this really weird thing. That I am actually also that. Like it just hits you maybe, like the scientist looking at a thing, objectifying it, which is what you've been trained to do as a Western scientist. You've been trained to objectify the world and consider that it exists as an objective, independent something or other that is static. And it's just there and you can come and take a picture and make claims about it. But now you're realizing, even before you get to the Copenhagen kind of thing, like that it's reacting to me and responding to, even before that, now you're realizing, even if it's a static something, what it's made out of is what I'm made out of. And if I take myself to be a physical being, which physicalism tries to argue for, and even consciousness is seen as an emergent property of matter, that's okay actually. Like, we don't have to shit on that view. Because what a wonderful thing, and this is I think one of the Carl Sagan things, like we were made of stardust kind of thing, that view I like. I hate the pale blue dot view. I'm going to fight that view. Till my dying breath I will fight that view because you're not small, you're not insignificant. I hate the humility that comes from that kind of insignificance. But I do love this view, which is like a stardust view. That's a beautiful view. There, it's ennobling. There you feel, oh my God, like every man and every woman is a star. Like we're composed of that thing which is made, like the luminous things in the sky that inspire us to write poetry. That is the shit I'm made of. Like that's what I am. That luminous star. Like right now, I am 13.7 billion years old. Like how wonderful. Like the 9-year-old, the 8-year-old, which Socrates points out, understands the highest physics. I don't know, highest trigonometry, right? Like there's a Socrates bit where he shows that learning is just remembering. He's trying to prove past lives, I think, or he's trying to prove the inherent nature of all knowledge. Or he gets like a 9-year-old slave boy or something to just like discover for himself rules that Socrates leads him to realizing. It's beautiful. What is it? I forget. I forget exactly what work that was, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, oh, it's been so long since I studied Western philosophy, and tonight it's exciting to talk, for Swamiji, I want to talk about Western philosophy to show, like, fuck this idea of East and West. It's like, the Western scientists are as much sadhus as the Eastern sadhus. Like, they've discovered the same things, almost, arguably. We just ignore them. We ignore them because we have these big grants for projects that, like, pay money. But there are people, right now, probably, who are, like, have given everything up, and who've given their whole lives to looking at Ma. And they're looking at Ma, and it's just crazy to think, like, everything they could possibly need is there in the atom. And why not? The whole scientific quest is a darshana. It's a philosophical and spiritual inquiry into reality. And there's no way to look at the world without looking at yourself. And that's what happens. Like, this moment of, like, oh my God, like, I'm looking at the world. I'm the world looking at the world. I am the world. Like, that moment. I don't have to say I am the world in its entirety, but to feel like I'm a part of the world. I'm intricately connected to the world. For some reason, that realization seems to solve the existential angst that the Buddha is pointing to, the dukkha that Satra is pointing to. That angst, that feeling of, like, incompleteness, to reference Godell's paper, that uncertainty, that relativity, that, like, feeling might come from this sense of separation from everything. I feel so alone in this world, actually. Because I look at the world and I say it's an objective something or other that exists out there. And like the Sankyans of old, the scientists of today say it's inert. How sad. I look at this world and I see matter, just dead matter. Rocks floating in space. No wonder I'm led to, if not hedonism, like just trying to, like, distract myself from the fact that this is just rocks floating in darkness, eventually nihilism, the despair of realizing that, like, no matter how much joy I find in the senses, and there's considerable joy, of course, in the senses. Donna Julia's eyes, oh my God. What am I looking at? Am I looking at her eyes, the physical eyes? Like, I don't know. Like, if I had to, like, look at that body, the lifeless corpse of Donna Julia, would I find it quite as attractive? Or am I looking through the eyes or into the eyes for something? The eyes are the window to the soul. What the fuck is that? Like, what am I attracted to in Donna Julia? Why am I the astronomer, like, turning to the sky as opposed to my book? And why is it that I, Don Juan, am turning to Donna Julia's eyes? That's what I want to look at. You know, like, what is that? What's attracting me? Arguably, it's a quest for understanding myself. And this moment, this scientist is expressing that by looking at nature, by looking at reality, I am in fact reality looking at itself. And what am I if not sentient? I'm sentient. If I'm reality, then there's a thrilling moment of realizing not only am I a part of the whole, or maybe intrinsically linked with the whole, maybe I am the whole, I don't know, like, you can't articulate this. It's a religious experience, right? Like, I'm overwhelmed just thinking about it. It's not, the words don't come. It's a religious, properly speaking, religious experience of, like, the thing that I wanted my whole life, that I sought out in relationships, in possession, in grants, in Nobel Prizes, whatever. I'm thinking, like, the world of a scientist maybe, or, like, the world of anybody. It's like, I just was unable to scratch that itch, that feeling of just separation. Now here in this moment, something clicked, and I realized, oh my God, there is no separation. I'm either a part of it, intrinsically connected to the whole of it, or maybe the whole in it. But whatever happens, I am, and it is, and there's something connecting us. Like, what is this? What is it to be the universe looking at itself? Now the universe, immediately, the picture changes immediately. From the world being, this is so interesting, from the world being just like dead matter, inert matter, which I can, like, frack, because I somehow think that my mathematical models mean I can control it. The certainty and the hubris that I get from my ill-considered materialism, like, gives me the sense that it's matter and I can frack it however much I want. Who gives a fuck? She won't protest. Because she's not a she, she's an it. Like, that moment, like, when I realize that that's not true, when I look at the world and I realize I am the world looking at itself, the world goes from being dead matter, which I frack and control. It goes from that to being a living, breathing being, a being worthy of reverence and dare I say, devotion. Like, without any theism here, you can look at reality, you can look at all of nature and say, I'm like, say God without saying God, you know, like, this is the religious experience, like, of realizing, first of all, it's sentient. It's a being, for I am a being, and I am it, observing it. I am he, observing he. And this is the crazy thing. And my being participates in that being. If I am not it, I want to go so far as to say I am he, if I can't say I am he, you are he. But if I can't say I am he, I can't deny that I'm related, at least somewhat. I maybe a part of he, that's crazy. Like, I'm a part of him, but at least related. Because in this moment, the intimacy cannot be questioned. The intimacy is immediate and obvious, and it's more real than any scientific fact I've ever seen. It's a feeling. It's a feeling. And who can argue with that? It's a new feeling. A feeling like we've never felt before. A feeling of real love, of real yamala, of real sexual union. Everything else was just meat suits rubbing up against one another, or like even minds intercoursing with one another. It's like how it pales in comparison to the feeling of this recognition that I am at least a part of her, if not at least related, if not her, if not a part of her, at least related to her. There's this moment again is the universe studying the universe, and there's like a desire to. So what I realize here is that the universe is sentient. It's worthy of reverence. I am it, or I'm a part of it. And what I'm doing now is its expression. Like that realization, I think, is Shaktism. Like that's the moment when you realize, oh my God, there's Icha. There's desire. It's the kind of desire that ruined my life. Like I maybe lost my spouse and my house and my mouse, all because I wanted to look at a rock in a laboratory. But for what? Because there's some deep innate curiosity about this rock. It was never about the rock. It was about me. The whole time I was curious about me, and I'm looking at the rock because, I don't know, like, I just, as a kid, I'm just play acting here. Like, imagine being a scientist and being a kid and, like, seeing a cool rock one day while you're out on a hike, and then next thing you know, you're going to college and studying geology, and you're making bad puns about rocks at the bar, looking at a rock band and shit. Like, you get to the university level, and you get your degrees, and you're now working in a lab and everything, and here you are just looking at rocks. Motherfucking stones. You're not even stoned, like stone sober. You're like looking at the stone, and you'd rather do this than go out on dates and shit because you sacrificed all your social skills for this shit. You know, like you spent too much time reading charts and expecting the universe to be predictable that you forgot how to talk to women. This is, I think, a very important point that a lot of scientists. I'm sorry about this generalization, but there's a stereotype. And I think it's a helpful stereotype, actually, because a lot of scientists, a lot of people who are like very logical, STEM people, dating is kind of hard, right? Like, I mean, I'm not going to, I don't know. Not always is that the case. But we always have this joke of like, in university, how like there's a whole different dating scene in the more liberal arts kind of part of university, the arts kind of music departments, and not even music department, they can also be really nerdy. And nerdy in the sense that like they expect things to work according to a formula. So if you think that women work in this way, you'll be very frustrated. People don't work in this way. And I think that the reason why we think that we can game the system is because that's what our models, our scientific and mathematical models, based on a misunderstanding, based on hubris, that's what it teaches us. And then we go out on a date or something and we find that we can't really talk to a person because they don't work that way. That humans aren't computer programs, and that brings a lot of humility. And so this person arguably is struggling in life for so many reasons. I'm sorry to project and sorry to generalize, but I just like this story and I like this character, so stay with me. So this geologist, he's there and he's like, she or they or whatever, they're there and they're looking at the rock, and this moment is the moment that they've sacrificed everything for. Something in them led them to look at the rock, and even at the cost of like very, very real things. And in looking at the rock, they suddenly realize maybe in that moment that the desire to look at the rock, that curiosity, that quest for truth is really a quest of self-knowing. I think maybe in that moment they remember their childhood when they saw the first rock and they recollect the feeling of wonder, which they probably haven't felt in years. They probably just got used to the day-to-day humdrum of like going through university and like just doing it. But why are they doing it? Because as a child, there was a feeling of reverence around seeing a rock. And that's all that person needed to eventually get to a point in their life where they're again, that child looking at the rock and realizing they were like looking at their mother the whole time. This is actually really hard to talk about because it's about science and it's about all this. And it's like the pratyaksha of it. It's like, yeah, oh my God. This living, breathing Ma. Like it's this realization that makes science a viable path for religion. That's why Swamiji is able to state that science and art are independent and equally valid means for realizing the absolute. But with the theory of Advaita, this is maybe me trying to unpack what he meant based on the light of this experience. Like, it's possible to just look at a rock, and this is why. Because by looking at the rock, if you can realize that I am the universe looking at the universe, then you realize the universe is sentient. It at least shares my sentience in some way, shape, or form. I am sentient. I can't deny that. Even if it's an emergent property of matter, what the fuck? Like, the fact that matter can produce sentience, I don't even need to get into a David Chalmers hard problem of consciousness thing here. It's like, what? Like, I don't even care whether the brain produces consciousness or if consciousness dreams up a brain. Who gives a fuck? In this moment, I am conscious, and in my conscious experience, which could be an epiphenomenon, an accident, electrical and chemical signals, whatever, I'm conscious, and I think I'm matter. That's it. I think I'm matter, and I'm looking at matter, and now this matter, which is conscious, is looking at what was supposedly unconscious. Only a moment ago, I thought it was unconscious, and now I realize it can't be unconscious, for I am it, and I am it I'm doing something. I'm not just conscious and matter. Like, I matter. You see what this is the exact opposite to this, like, oh, I don't matter, I'm just in this universe view. No, you matter because of this moment where you're looking at matter. And that's why you matter, because that's what matter does. Matter matters to matter, because Ma is there. Like, and this is what turns scientists into babbling prophets and babes and mystics. Like, this moment is a remarkable moment. You can think about it forever. How ennobling. So then in this moment, reality is understood to be sentient, dynamic, unpredictable, chaotic, not something to be controlled and used, but rather also importantly something that desires, and whose desire is my desire, and whose desire is an innate desire to know itself, a curiosity. And once you touch that, you touch Ma's curiosity, as it were, that's when we're in touch, arguably, with the heart of Shaktism, Icha, desire, the dynamism of reality is this desire. Desire for what? For this, actually. Nothing but this. And that's where you get my favorite kind of nihilism, which is like, it's just as valid to look at a rock as it is to kiss Donna Julia. It's just as valid to like start a genocide as it is to like save starving children on the streets of Kolkata. Like literally whatever, like everything. In the nihilist sense, nothing matters because everything is matter. And Ma is there. And what is she doing there? Just that. Whatever's there, whatever's happening there, that's her expression. And in this moment, this scientist, he realizes that he is the expression of the universe, right? In a very tangible, very immediate way, he realizes that he is a universe experiencing itself, looking at itself, and questing for itself, penetrating itself. Like, this is that sexual union that the Shaivas describe in these erotic terms. Like, how wonderful to realize this. And so science alone could have facilitated this discovery. Anyway, with Copenhagen inference, this is where another realization comes. And this realization, you get this beautiful devotional kind of flavor of like, I'm the universe looking at the universe. But notice, the universe is endowed not just with Icha, with curiosity and with sentience. It's endowed with power. It essentially is power. So last week we talked about how matter is not fixed. It's not solid. It's like a flowing matrix of probability. Now we're understanding that it's mathematical, that these models, mathematical models, are the way we understand, meaning it's internal. So this reality is not out there. And even when we study it as a something or other, we come to this conclusion it's intimately associated with me. But also, there's a creative power that I have in defining it. Like, and that's what Copenhagen inference introduces us to. The idea that like, by observing it, it reflects what I'm looking for. So this is maybe the experience of grace. Like, I get in this reality just what I put out. And this is where you get kind of like Greg Braden-y type kind of claims, right? Like, so like Greg Braden and other scientists like that. Greg G will posit manifestation theory, like things like that. So you get new age kind of spiritual concepts based on science-y sort of claims. And here Copenhagen influence is just so rich. You can frack that for like so much oil, as it were, when it comes to selling new age products. Because, I mean, I'm not criticizing it. It's just like here, it's like, it's exciting to think that like, if this world is indeed something that I almost code for by my participation in it, then why can't I have a Ferrari or something? So I think hard enough that I already have it, and then it will come. And it's true. People verify this all the time in their own lives. Like, obviously, it's not a claim that's like scientifically proven, but what is scientifically valid and like, accepted is this Copenhagen influence. It's like, when I look at the particle, it acts differently. When I look away, it doesn't act differently. What's going on here? And you can see the Purusha Prakriti kind of seer-seen dynamic. It's a loving, playful dynamic, a hide-and-seek dynamic almost, but it's a dynamic. You can't deny that it's a dynamic, and you can't deny that it's a dialogue. And if you take the mathematical claim seriously, it's a dialogue occurring within me, with me. Like, again, you don't need to do this. You can still assert from the physicalist point of view that it's something other than me, but now you cannot deny that I am also it. So the dichotomy between me and it is problematized. That's why I'm not making any Sankhyan claims here. I don't care to like distinguish consciousness from matter. Like, I'm making claims from within matter, recognizing that matter is the same as consciousness. There's no distinction between consciousness and matter. Although it's fashionable in Eastern spirituality to try to abstract away from matter. I'm like, no, I love this Western approach also. I'm just like, yeah, just get into matter. But notice, I'm pointing out your hypocrisy though. I'm saying that like, most of you in doing science, first of all, don't do science. You just religiously accept what your scientific leaders tell you, which I think is just as bad as every religion except worse, because you're all pricks about it, because you think you're smarter, because you have math and science. I'm sorry. Those things are not any more intelligent than Aquinas or Anselm. You just haven't read those things. So you think your thing is alone smart. So it's a religion. Don't deny that. Secondly, also don't deny that it's a religion based on materialism. The reason you people do science is not because you're looking for truth. The few of you who have looked for truth, very rarely do we talk about them. The ones you care about are the ones whose discoveries have given you ways to control nature, but not in any way that's helpful or meaningful. You know, only ways in which that have emphasized the emptiness from which this quest came in the first place. So I'm criticizing that in the West. It's materialism, it's hypocrisy. But I'm recognizing this, which is the same instinct that the sadhu has to like give everything up to go on a quest for truth, which culminates in the realization that I am the universe questing into myself for no other reason than because it's my nature to do so. But the problem with Eastern philosophy sometimes is that we abstract away from the material. We try to prove that consciousness is something other than the material. And then we prove that matter is nothing. Like the thing that the West does to consciousness, the East does to matter. Neither has the whole picture. That's why what Swamiji is trying to do is brilliant. He's taking Western claims about physical anatomy seriously. And he's integrating them, as it were, to the Eastern claims about chakras and nadis. So the goal here is not to become Eastern. That's the danger of studying things like this, right? Like you very quickly like learn to be Indian or something, and you give up all of your Western intuitions about reality, which I think are valid and important. And my problem, if I come to the West, I might give up being Indian. At the end of the day, I'm still an Indian. I will never care about money, and time. I will never care about money and time. I can't. It's not available to me to care about those things. But also, I shouldn't try to be a Westerner, and a Westerner shouldn't try to be an Easterner. But in learning from one another, something beautiful can happen. We transcend almost our vantage point to see from a neutron point of view between the proton and electron or whatever. Wherever there's a dichotomy, wherever there's a dialogue, there's this possibility of this Devitraya Trika sort of reconciliation into the one, where we realize, oh my God, there's a third vantage point which accepts both as equally valid and equally true and argues that they both point to the same thing. Shiva and Shakti point to the same thing, as it were. Okay, coming to this thing, it's me. And what's my nature? Endowed with infinite power. Yes, this Ardhanarishwara. Like this infinite power to sculpt my reality. Like it's spoken of in linguistic mystical terms in the Shaiva tradition. Here it's spoken of in like Copenhagen inference participatory universe terms. But all we're saying is that you matter. You are the universe looking at itself, herself. You're sentient, and so is the universe. And more importantly, you're curious, and so is the universe. You have desire, the fundamental desires to know, and your knowing leads you to a kind of doing. So your desiring, knowing, and doing is innate to you and to the universe. The universe is now alive, and you're infinitely powerful. The universe is power. And the power is dynamic appearance of whatever you want, whenever you want, for the sake of this inquiry, of discovering what you are. So what is your will, your desire? This, and what is this? Knowledge and action. And the action and the knowledge are intimately linked, because once you know something, you've acted. And by acting, you start knowing. And again, the universe responds to our knowing, to our observation. So it acts based on our knowing. And we know based on its acting. And that's the energy of desire, this knowing and acting. So the Icha Kriya Jnana thing, or Icha Jnana Kriya thing, is rooted in the fundamental nature of reality, which I now understand through science is one. And that's what we were talking about last week. It's like, if we're going to be honest materialists, we cannot point to where I end and where material reality begins. Like, I cannot like say, this is the end of matter and this is the beginning of matter. This matter is called me and this matter is called you. I can't say that because it's all just matter. Swamiji points this out, that between me and the sun, there's an unbroken sheet of matter. Thrilling, because then I'm connected to the sun. At all times, I'm connected to the sun. At all times, I'm connected to you. Why don't I feel that? Because that indeed is the truth. And people do sometimes when they're on absinthe or something, or on a substance, or when they're making love, or in a moment of grief, or sometimes mowing the lawn. They just get this insight that maybe I am one with everything. Because that's the truth. That's what we are. So in contemplating this idea, we move away from our undigested sort of superficial materialism, which is, by the way, not even a real materialism, because we're not even doing it. We're not even actual scientists, like in the lab doing the work. But even when we are, we're not actually really confronting the facts of what reality is showing us. We're stubborn. We want our grant money. We're thinking about our grant money, and we're gossiping about the head of the research facility. But we're not actually looking at what she's telling us in the microscope. And she's telling us, interestingly, right now, without any theology, without any religion, she's telling us that she's alive, she's sentient, and she's intrinsically linked with my aliveness and my sentience. And what she does is what I do. For I am the universe. And there's no moment at which I end and the universe begins. It's all just one homogeneous sheet of matter. And what is that matter? Empty space. But is it just empty space? It's empty space filled with possibility. And that possibility is dynamic and energetic, and at any time you can do anything. That's why quantum mechanics is so crazy, because the more we look for laws, the more particles act in a way that we don't expect. The more they assert their freedom. It's almost like the more we try to bind them to our understanding, the more they struggle to get free. It's like we think we're trying to get free of her, but at the same time she's trying to get free of us. It's like, this is crazy, because at the moment I don't know who is mom and who's child. Like, the feeling here is like, wait, whoa, like, you just did 180 on me. It's like, I thought you were playing the game. Like, there's this moment with Ma where you're like, wow, I misread the whole thing. The whole time, I thought you were playing with me and I was bound and you were binding me and I was trying to get free. And then I realized I was the jailer. This is where I start to get a little mad, I think. This is the harder realization. And I'm sorry, like, it's that time of the night for me. But like this realization is really hard to get my head around. And you can't, because like you switch, the vantage points switch so much. Am I this or am I this? And I don't know where I don't know which one. And which one is the jailer? Which one is the one that gets free? It's hard to deny that there's a dialogue between me and this. But the dialogue is between me and me. I'm not sure which part of the dialogue I'm in. Like aham or idam. And this is where Shaktism feels crazy, because like Shiva is Shakti. Shakti is Shiva. But we're not saying it's only one thing. We're not saying it's Brahman. Like, oh, there's no proton, there's no electron, there's just the neutron. No, we're saying there's a trinity. Even if you assert the one beyond the two, my experience right now as that one is very disequilibrating, because I'm whiplashing, as it were, at breakneck speed between this realization that I both am the jailer and the one struggling to get free. And like, it's just crazy, because the whole time I thought I was just, in the Eastern kind of idealist sense, the Pashu in Ma's Pasha, and she is Ma who binds me and contracts me and then forces me to like work out my freedom based on my own intrinsic recognition of Swatantriya. But then the flip, and then I realized, well, no, Ma has always like been there in front of me, and Ma has never once played a game with me. Like, how heartbreaking, right? Like, it's heartbreaking to think my whole life I projected onto her this idea of like, she's this guileful, like, confoundress, like Maha-Mai, magician, seductress. They're like, and in fact, she was the simplest and most honest of all. And like, I could never understand or appreciate her simplicity or honesty, because I'm so full of guile and deceit. And I'm the one who like insists on bondage, because I'm the one who looks at reality and says this and that, and I impose upon her all these things. And you know, in her grace and in her compassion, she plays along. She's willing to accept the bondage that I impose on her so that I can play my game. And it's fun for a little while, but then I have to like be honest with myself and realize she's just humoring me. The whole time I was a kid, forcing my mother to play this game of make-believe, and she went along with it too. But at no point did she try to trick me. At no point was she standing in front of me and holding up a veil. What a thrilling thing to realize I was holding the veil the whole time. You know? And then, at this point, we don't need any of the claims about idealism, right? Like, I was thinking maybe we could explore this, like, infinite divisibility, this anavasta dosha, because now it's no longer protons and neutrons, right? You can break those down too. And they're like quarks and shit. It's like, oh my god. There was a physicist, I think, who joked, if I knew that there would be so many new particles and different types of particles, I would have become a zoologist and not a physicist. Because now it feels like what it means to be a physicist is just like label and classify all the new shit that we're getting. The more we look at it, the more of it there isn't, and the more of it there is. And that's concerning, because then we are losing the particle that's supposed to be the atom, right? The thing that everything is based off of, the one discrete, indivisible particle. It was only indivisible before I divided it. Now I'm dividing it, and the more I divide it, the more of it there is to divide, and the more I divide it, the more of it there is to divide. I can divide it seemingly ad infinitum. So go on dividing then. In one text, Swabodhodaya Manjari, an argument against matter is this. And it's interesting, in like the 800 AD, like 9th century, it's like a tantric master, actually Viranatha or Vamanatha, probably Vamanatha, Viranatha, referring to the same person, a minister of war in the Kashmiri court at that time. He wrote a text called Swabodhodaya Manjari. And there, the opening kind of philosophical salvo, he makes a somewhat Buddhistic, but really very, very tantric claim, like this idea of matter being infinite regress. Like, you can just keep dividing it. He doesn't even talk about atoms or anything. You just like take a body. What is a body? Isn't it 7 dhatus? Like, it's made of 7 constituents? Take the 7 constituents. What is a bone? Isn't it made of 5 elements? Like that, he uses that logic, a classical kind of logic, to prove this beautiful like thing that in experimental physics we're verifying, that like anything, however indivisible you think it is, can be broken again and again and again and again. You can pulverize it until all that's left is ash. And smear that ash all over yourself, and then you're one with everything. There's this like feeling of just like, well, what are we doing if not the Tandava? Like, when we do material science, There's a reason why there's Shiva, I would argue. There's no reason why there's anything. There's no reason why there's Shiva. Right? There's no reason why there's anything. But if there is a Shiva outside of Nataraja, I think we ought to pay attention to that. Like, why is there a Shiva outside of Nataraja? And arguably, why is there a Nataraja? Why is there Shiva Nataraja outside of CERN? And you could argue, like, that's what we're doing at CERN, right? Like, human project in CERN is a particle collider. It's like a huge hadron particle collider, and we're just, like, smashing shit. Like, what? Like, if we are the universe, observing the universe, we're not just studying. It's hard fucking. It's like, wow, this is aggressive sex. Because what we're doing is destroying and delighting in it. The power that comes from destruction, it's an expression of power to destroy, and by destroying, power is released. Again, what a profound lesson. If we derive an axiological or like sort of emotional claim here, it's like, when Ma destroys us, what did we expect would happen? Isn't that what we do? Like, the moment we see something, we want to break it. Like, we want to fuck it and kill it at the same time. And we fuck it and kill it by shooting it around a Hadron Collider or something like that. Like, it's wonderful, and the best image for that, arguably, is Shiva dancing the Tandava, this Prachanda Tandava, where Shiva's just like dancing, and with his dance, he's destroying. And that's what we are doing at the Hadron Collider. It's like, I am Shiva dancing. See, I'm doing it now. Like, right now in the Hadron Collider, I'm breaking things apart. And what happens when I break them apart? And this is the emotional claim. Power comes. So when Ma is doing to me what I do to Ma, which, after all, I am Ma, this is proof. When I'm being broken up, do you think it's any different from when an atom is being broken up? Or when I'm being fused together, is it anything different? Like, notice, the fusion and the fission, like, the fusion that happens is harder in one sense. It's harder to bring things together. But is that not a kind of breaking? Because to be in fusion, I must give up what I was before to become something new. I'm merging, and therefore it's a kind of destruction. Or I'm splitting, which is a kind of destruction. So whether I'm breaking up with you or I'm making out with you, we're actually, in both cases, destroying each other and destroying ourselves. It's both destructive to kiss and to die, and to kiss and to kill. Do you see how it's destructive to kiss and to kill? Do you see how that's available in fusion and fission? But both are equally Shakti. Why? Because the same power, and of course quantities, you can talk about that, but it's power and energy and life. If you're going to define life as power and energy, expansion comes from anytime I force two things together that don't want to go together, or anytime I force a thing apart that thinks it's together. And that's all that we do to get power in nuclear processes. And the sun is doing that. Like, Ma arguably does that in our psychological and emotional lives. Every time somebody breaks up with us, anytime we get into a relationship, anytime we fuck, anytime we kill, anytime we are killed, anytime we are fucked, like, it's no different. It's fusion, fission, fusion, fission. And like, every time I'm broken, either by merging or by splitting, anytime I'm broken, I become powerful. This is like the proof, the physical proof for the Kanye West claim. What doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. It's Nietzsche claim, right? But like the Kanye West, the Rishi of our time. Like, this claim that what doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. Like, this claim is proved in physics. And if I can take seriously that I am the universe, look what the universe does when it's broken. Look what I'll do when I'm broken. So how then should I react to the process of being shot around this Hadron Collider, spun around in samsara like a rotisserie chicken? I was so lucky to hear such great poetry. But what is it like to be spun around? It's to be a generator for electricity. Like, that's what happens when something is spun around. What is it like to whirl about samsara? What is this samsara but a Hadron Collider? What am I but a particle in that samsara which is about to be smashed or fused? One or the other. And in either case, I will be empowered. So this wonderful feeling of like, yeah, samsara, do your worst. I mean, I know what will happen. I know I will be smashed. In fact, that's the purpose of this Hadron Collider called samsara. And like, that's good. It's good every time something breaks me. How wonderful. Because in that moment, I discovered my power. It's only when the heart is broken, arguably, right, that we get these poetic claims of like love being present when the heart is broken. Like, the mind breaks. That's what happens to mystics and scientists and whatnot. Artists, mystics, scientists. They all become mad. The mind breaks. The body breaks. I think the body will break maybe long before the mind. But both break. And in breaking both of these things, power comes. This is what I ultimately asked my guru for permission to do. For a long time, he's been cautioning me to treat it like a marathon and not a sprint. Be careful. And now I was seized with this fury, and I went to him and I said, Maharaj, I want to break it. And I think I can, because she's breaking it. I'm ready. I'm ready to break it. Break it physically and break it psychologically. Like, I'm no longer interested in playing it safe. And there's a lot of my bhava recently has come from that experience. But then finally he's like, yeah, just go for it. Go for it. And this feeling of like, whoa, unbelievable power that comes from the breaking. And what is spiritual life but that breaking? And yet we resist it. We resist it because we haven't learned from nature that fundamental secret that she has to teach us. That it is not in the bending, but in the breaking that spirituality is available. Thou canst not look upon the face of God and live. Oh, it's wonderful, wonderful ways of seeing the Bible living in the matter in CERN. So anyway, Fritjof Capra. I have never actually read this book, but he wrote a book called The Tao of Physics. Maybe I should have consulted that book before giving a talk on something I know nothing about. But Fritjof Capra has it's another book that he writes, I think. I don't know if it's in The Tao of Physics, but it's another book, I think, where he talks about his experience on a beach. He's like there on the beach and he's having this like moment of realizing that the universe is dynamic. It's alive, and that he is the universe, everything we just described. But then he says, and now I understand. He writes this in his biography, or in his introduction to one book. He says, I now understand what the Hindu means by his symbol of the dancing Shiva. It's remarkable to me that this guy, who of course culturally is aware of these Eastern symbols, like he's in this moment having darshana of Lord Shiva. Do you think he got a Shiva mantra? Do you think he took Shiva Diksha? Like, oh, some guru gave him Namah Shivaya. And now he's sitting and he's meditating on a mala. Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya, Namah Shivaya. You think that's how he had a darshana of Shiva? Fuck you. He didn't do that. He just looked seriously at what was in front of him. Why should it be so hard to see what's in front of us? We make it hard. It's fun. It's our leela. But like, to think that you need diksha for this is preposterous. To think that anybody could give you anything that will give you access to Ma is preposterous. Who could gatekeep the one who is naked? Who could veil her when she's infinite space? You can't get the cloak around her fast enough before she's out under. Therefore, I think it's a remarkable and thrilling thought that you could be Fritjof Capra on the beach and have darshana of Shiva, having never, in this life at least, if you want to make an apologetic claim defending the tradition here. I say fuck the tradition. Fuck books and churches and dogmas. All these are so secondary. Why? Here's the proof. Here's the proof that everything we're doing is futile. That all this religion is futile. And therein lies its validity. It's like it's just as valid as science and as art. And notice that means that at no point are you not doing spirituality. How can you not be meditating? If meditating is thinking about Ma, how can you not think about Ma? Every thought you think is Ma. And how can you close your eyes and think about Ma only? When you open your eyes, are you not seeing her? And this is proof. Fritjof Capra is like literally seeing Shiva because he's saying so. He's saying, now I understand what the Hindu means by his Nataraja. Because why? He's there in this moment experiencing the dynamism of reality. The dancing Shiva, he's saying. Prachanda Tandava. And changed his whole life. Now he's writing books like the Tao of Physics, and he's become a mystic as a result of being a physicist. So how beautiful. And so Swamiji's claim, I think, in one sense can be understood in this way. That with the theory of Advaita, seeing everything as just one sheet of matter, and that being a dynamic living reality, and recognizing that I am that, even that will be a spiritually conducive view. So then what do we make of hedonism and of nihilism? Because here we would argue that if you're a physicalist, if you accept this world as real and matter as real, if you accept this in the truest possible sense, you would be fulfilled here and now, for all the reasons aforementioned. But often we don't, like I was saying last week, we don't accept it in the truest, fullest sense. We don't follow our claims through to logical conclusion. We don't actually look. We think we look, but we're not looking. We're seeing and we think we're looking. But then based on that kind of half seeing, we then say, okay, there's a world, it exists objectively independent, it's out there, I can frack it, I can take as much oil as I want, it doesn't matter, it's not sentient, but what it does offer me is pleasurable experience, so I can plunge into that. I'm going to argue that this is the best possible thing you could do. It's the most reasonable thing you could do, because the thing that makes most sense, the thing that's most immediately, evidently obvious is that I'm here now, and that there are certain things in my experience that make me feel good. What should I base my actions off of, if not that? It's the most innate and natural thing to do. So I would argue that a materialist naturally becomes a hedonist. Not necessarily, but often. Because what else would you guide your life by? Like what could have any reality? Like even money doesn't make that much sense, because money is an abstraction about material. So if you're a true materialist, it's not the money that you want, it's the material that the money gives you. And again, if you're a true materialist, you realize it's not the material that you want actually. It's the psychological state that you get from having that material. So again, just like in mathematics, you realize eventually the physical world is now a mathematical construct. You also now realize that the material is only material for you if you can experience it. So the thought experiment here is like, okay, say you could have money, but you're not allowed to spend it. I can give you $1 billion right now, but you're not allowed to spend it. Do you want it? Oh, also, no one will know that you have it. So you can't even get like bragging rights for having $1 billion. Because you have $1 billion, no one knows that you have it, and you're not allowed to spend it. Do you still want it? Obviously not. Why would you want $1 billion if it's not even really $1 billion? The only reason it's $1 billion is because, based on some 6-7 logic, some delusion of society, we all agree that it's worth that much. Right now, you could withdraw your power from that construct, and the whole, like, it frustrates me so much that people are so upset about wealth. Like, the 1% controls 9%. You guys, like, what the fuck? Nobody forced you to buy the iPhone. What the fuck? How dare you accuse other people for a construct that you are reifying? At any time, you can take the power back from this 1% that allegedly owns 99% of the wealth. Fuck your wealth. Your concept of wealth is money. How cheap. Just because they have a certain number on a screen, you think they're wealthy? My God, live with some of these people. Meet some of these people. What you see there is not necessarily wealth. And that's sobering. It's sobering to see people with so much money feel so scarce and so sad, so depressed. And what you see on the banks of the Ganga sometimes. People who own nothing, eating a banana. You see more wealth there. And Alexander was the kind of person who knew wealth when he saw it. He knew power when he saw it. Because when he got to the border of India, according to a Roman, not Indian, but a Roman historian, Theodorus Siculus, he was broken. His mind was broken. His heart was broken. His body was broken. Because he realized the futility of the kind of power he was seeking based on a materialism that he himself didn't even understand. He just thought that if he conquered the world, he would feel better. Arguably, maybe he wanted to be one with everything. His teacher was, after all, Aristotle. I think that's what fucked him up, because Aristotle was a materialist, kind of physicalist kind of person. And like, I think. And he's like, okay, I'll just conquer the world then. So this young man, who could have been a great sadhu, instead spent his whole life becoming like a business magnate or something. Just buying up all the land and like dominating. And then he gets to India and he realizes how futile all of that was. Bye, Alistair. Jaima. The secret of the universe will have to wait. It is that, taking care of your family. Like, what? There it is. It has to wait no longer. I have to wait. As it were. Because that's the real thing, taking care of our family. Anyway, so here's Theodorus Siculus writing that Alexander is at the border of India. It's kind of a mythological account almost at this point. I don't know if it happened, but it's poetic to think about. It's poetic to think that it's a Roman writer writing this. So here's this guy, Alexander the Great, who has conquered the known world. And he's about to conquer India probably. He has the military might to do it, right? Arguably, he could probably have conquered India. I mean, we'll never know. We'll never know. But this great Macedonian prince has never been stopped before. No sword could stop him. I mean, what? Has Western civilization produced a better, more powerful person than that? He was literally unstoppable until he got to the limits of Western civilization, which is the limits of materiality. The realization that actually it's based on a misreading of materiality. The aggression, the violence, it comes from this feeling of scarcity and lack, which comes from a misreading. A feeling of separation, therefore I go and kill and subjugate and frack and whatnot. So now I'm at the border, Alexander, and in front of me is this naked guy on a rock. They call him the gymnosophist in Greek, right? Which means not the sophisticated person at the gym, but the philosopher who is naked, the gymnosophist, the naked philosopher. Because that's what a sadhu would have looked like back then. Just like sitting simply on the rock with very few things. Maybe a blanket, maybe a water pot, probably those things. But at least a loincloth. Maybe not even that. Maybe he was a Nangta type. We know that tradition existed for a long time. So at that time, maybe there's a sadhu of this kind sitting, and they get into a conversation which is beautiful. Like, this is like a Swami Vivekananda moment almost, of like East meets West, which is happening within the whole drama, as the hemispheres of the brain, whatever. And so here, Alexander is so impressed, to his credit, with the intellect and realization of this gymnosophist. Then he invites him to come back to the court. Now, remember the talk we gave earlier today. What is the defining trait of a sadhu? It's freedom. They can never be bought. They can never be cajoled. You cannot threaten them into doing anything, and you cannot buy them into doing anything. If you think you can do these things, it's because you don't know a sadhu. And the reason why you don't know a sadhu is because you think you understand the universe. The universe is not a thing to be bought and sold or bartered with. It's not a thing to be understood even. It's a thing to be surrendered to, as it were. And sadhus are like that. It's like you just can't understand them. They do things for their own reasons. And so Alexander was really, really shocked when he offered this sadhu unbelievable wealth to come back with him to Macedonia and be in his court and continue to have these conversations with him. In other words, he's like, I had Aristotle, but this is way cooler. So can you come back and you can be my tutor? And like, it'll be so cool. You can meet all these other guys and they're great philosophers and it'll be awesome. Please come back. In other words, he thought that this pitch, like, I'll pay you this much money, come with me, he thought that would obviously work. But Alexander, for the first time, probably in a long time, he didn't get what he wanted. Because he finally, for the first time in a long time, met something he couldn't buy. Like, he bought everything else. Every other like king in every other kingdom was like, okay, here. But this guy, he was more powerful than those kings, and Alexander had the wisdom to understand that. He realized he was reckoning with a power, a psychological force that was way more impregnable than the fortress that he just conquered last week. Because there he just waved a bit of money, and before he knew it, some guard betrayed the Night's Watch, and he got his people in, he killed something. Like, it was easy. Everything else was easy because everyone else could be bought and sold. But this sadhu, random guy in history, nobody knows his name even, who cares for his name? He stands for all of us. He stands for every naked Indian on every rock, who's ever dared to defy money. That's the heart of it, really. Say no to money. Fuck money. Don't live for it. And look what happened. The force of capitalism, consumerism, appeared on the border of India. It got in with the British. Ramakrishna chased it out. But here it didn't even get in. I don't know who this person was. Maybe a person greater than Ramakrishna. Because with Ramakrishna, he let it get in. He let it get in and convince us all to wear suits and go to college and give our lives up for a bread-winning education and jump through hoops for Westerners. But Ramakrishna eventually chased it out through the Vivekananda energy. But this guy, whoever he was, didn't even let it into India. India was impervious to this Western fascination with money. So Alexander, he's there, he's trying to buy this guy, and the guy cannot be bought, so Alexander, of course, then resorts to the next thing, which is to pull the sword on him. If you can't get what you want through cajoling, then you become very aggressive. I once did this thing on my friend's Tinder. It was cute. My roommate, she used to, be on Tinder. I thought it was so funny. I thought the whole thing was funny. And so I was it's so mean, but I would go on a dating app with her consent and not catfish, not really catfish, but with her, try to get maybe I shouldn't even be confessing this, but ask somewhat Socratic sort of questions. I was trying to prove to, how do I put this? I was trying to prove to Madeline, my roommate, that she was very naive about a lot of the people that she was talking to. So I would say, okay, give me 20 messages and I will get this guy to send you his resume. In other words, I was trying to make fun of dating and the way that people date because it's so hypocritical, right? It's I want sex, but I'm going to pretend that I don't. Or I care about you. I'm going to pretend that I do, but I don't. It's really funny. And it's easy to point out when you have the sannyasin sense for sounding out realities. It was so funny. We would have guys send their whole resume and shit. It was so funny. But then we noticed very quickly that if the person that we were talking to was frustrated, or if they were not able to cajole something out of that conversation, they would become aggressive quite often. And it's interesting because it's almost like we first try to be nice, but then when we realize we can't get what we want that way, then we draw the sword because we're committed to getting what we want at all costs, driven by this angst, this feeling of separation. We need union, and yet we don't know how to get it because we don't recognize that we already have it. We've projected that we don't. So this is probably what Alexander is feeling. Probably I'm projecting now in thinking this. I don't know what he was feeling. But he drew a sword. Allegedly, he then threatened the naked guy. He was like, okay, fine. If you will not come because I'm going to pay you for it, then let me, make you. I'll drag you. That's what they said to the Divine Mother and the Chandi. If you won't come, again, it's the same conversation. Shumba and Nishumba, they're trying to get Mother to come so he can marry her. And first they try with this cajoling strategy. It's don't you know who my boss, Dhumalochana says, my boss has all this stuff. He's got Indra's elephant. He names all the great things. And he's he's really handsome. And you're the most beautiful woman. So why don't you just come and marry him? You'll have all this shit. And she says no. And then he says, oh, if you won't come, I'll drag you by the hair. That's the response. If you won't come because we're cajoling you, we'll come because we'll threaten you. And that's what Alexander does to this guy. And this guy laughed at him. Allegedly, he quoted the verse from the Gita that I am that which water cannot wet, that fire cannot burn, that weapons cannot cut. That realization. That you can do whatever you want to my body. The Christ had this realization. What does it mean to me? I'm not the body. And if I am the body, then I am this body, motherfucker. That realization. If I am the body, how can I say this is where I end and this is where I end and this is where everything else begins? If I am the body, take that seriously. Then I am this whole thing. How is this body different from all materiality? Or I am not the body. In either case, what can your little sword do to me? Put this in the ground, I'll still be here. I'll be laughing at you from the stars. I am that, made of stardust, as it were. What can you do? How futile is this sword? And to say this in the face of a sword, there's a gun out in front of you, and to say that, the recognition must be solid. It's a wonderful thing. Anyway, at this moment, Alexander, yeah, I know, doesn't it? It feels real. But notice, it's not the pain that we're reacting to. It's all the psychological overlay that we put on that pain. This is bad. The same thing, pain is pleasurable in some cases, like spicy food or horror movies or BDSM dungeons or even sex. Like, there are many people for whom it's not pleasurable because of their psychological associations with it. And in fact, there's like great violence to putting flesh in flesh in every case, whether it's eating meat or fucking. It's like in every case, like flesh and flesh is violent. Look at it. Look at this universe. Oh my God. But again, it's pleasurable in one sense, if it's understood. Friction, the word for sex in Sanskrit, one of the many words is sangata, which you can also use for like rubbing two sticks together to get fire. Imagine being the sticks though. Like getting a tattoo or something. It's like, it's hot a little bit. It's like the friction of it. And so the friction of the wood, it's same as sex though, isn't that? Like and on the friction of like something being difficult and overcoming it, that's pleasurable. There's something deeply edifying about pain, and yet we have all of these psychological like, ways of opting out of the enlivening experience of pain. You know, hunger, how beautiful. Pain, all these things. Heartbreak, it's only when these things happen that power comes. In fact, what is working out at the gym but painfully breaking your muscles, right? You're tearing your muscles and they grow back stronger. It's the same principle again and again in everything. And so, therefore, we have this yogi who is not afraid of pain. He's not afraid of death. He's not afraid of anything. And nor does he care for anything. He's established in his own right. And Alexander realizes that in all of his 29 years, I think he was 29, my age probably, when he had this realization. He died from it. This realization killed him, I think. I mean, he died of a fever, probably an STD, who knows. But it was shortly after this conversation. So I like to conjecture, though this is not at all in the text, who knows what happened, but I like to conjecture, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me. I like to conjecture that he was so disturbed by what he heard. The cognitive dissonance of it killed him. And the reason I conjecture this is not baseless. I mean, I'm talking about when Miss Dutcher got ill. And Swami Vivekananda said, this is no ordinary illness of the body. Her mind is rejecting these ideas. In other words, when you hear something that is so manifestly against what you believe, it can break you. And that's when the power comes out, right? And so Alexander, I don't think his death was tragic. I think it was wonderful. Maybe it was samadhi. I don't know. He had the potential. Somebody who can conquer a kingdom like that, I think only needs one conversation with a sadhu. Our problem is we talk to sadhus. They tell us everything we need to hear. And then a few years later, we're complaining that we're not getting enough instruction from them. Why? Maybe we weren't the kind of person who could conquer a kingdom. And we had no business then to try to conquer the mind. And so we stood in front of a sadhu. He told us the truth. From the very start, he told us the truth. Thou art that Shvetaketu. But we could never hear it. We didn't have the strength to hear it and act upon it. What would it look like to actually act upon what we heard? I mean, what strength would be required? And Alexander had it. I don't know that he didn't go home and like just go into samadhi or something. Maybe he went home, thought about it, had a fever, body died, but actually he was plunged into the absolute. I think it's a happy ending. I think this is the West finally fucking listening, right? Like sitting down and learning something for once, instead of going out into the world with a sword and saying, your religions are wrong. These are idols. Why are you worshipping idols? God is not in the idol. Now convert to our religion, and if you don't, we'll kill you. But before that, we got a package deal. If you convert to Christianity, it'd be great for you because then you'll pay less taxes, or you can live in these communities and we'll give you a job. And how about a wife? I mean, it's crazy. People would actually at that time like offer like wives, like they would arrange marriages if you would accept their Christianity. They would do anything, women, wine, whatever to take you to convert, right? What the fuck is wrong with you people? Why would you show up to India and first with checks in hand try to like convince us that our religions are wrong? And then having done that, and that not working in some cases, then you draw the sword. Why would you kill all these people? And why would you like come to Mexico and say that somehow their version of Mother Mary, which they're calling something else, is wrong? Because your version of Mother Mary is correct. Like, where is that coming from? This hubris to think that science is the one true path because it works. You guys can predict Halley's Comet, but you can't predict the divorce papers that show up when your marriage fails. Like, what good is it? Like, what good is your ability to predict Halley's Comet? What good is your nuclear power? We've been living in India in darkness for centuries. There are places in India right now that have never seen electric light. They're way more enlightened than your insomniac cities afraid of darkness will ever be. All of this Western civilization, do not be impressed with it. It is premised on so much insecurity, so much pain and fear, so much suffering. This is the price of your civilization. All the people you've killed. Right now, the pharmaceutical company, GlaxoSmithKline, probably right now, as we're speaking, in Indonesia, they're probably testing illegally all their drugs on like poor Indonesians in some villages somewhere. And then you here in your Nobel Peace Prize conference will hail it as a medical marvel when they invent some new drug that they will like charge you a lot of money for. Like, how crazy of you to celebrate something that for many people in many parts of the world meant death. How ridiculous, how insane to celebrate this. Shouldn't be proud of this. It's shameful. Like, this is shameful. How horrific. And if you think I've come here for your money to somehow bring back remittances for our work in India, like, we don't need your money, we have God. And this is important. We did not come here to marvel at your civilization. We came here to point to its futility. The same way that that naked guy on the rock pointed it out to Alexander, except he had to come to us. We're maybe a bit more gracious this time. We're coming to you and say, what the fuck, wake up. Do not be impressed with your schools and your universities and your money and your bank balances and your electricity and your like medical science and your like low infant mortality rate. Like, what are you doing? You're extending life. Chemo, all the fucking time. Because like what, the body being there longer is better? Whereas the heart is dead long ago the heart died. You can't even taste food anymore. You're all like withering and just anemic. And chemo. Yes, what are you doing? Like, this is your medical marvel? And all of it, as Swamiji points out, is premised upon such violence, such tyranny. It's by the sword that the West, and many places in the world arguably, collected their wealth. And then they say how great our civilization is. And because we have so much wealth, having taken it from everyone else, you therefore have to accept our Mary. Your mother is no longer, like, legit. And by the way, it's not enough to say that Jesus is a son of God. He's the son of God. Give up your Krishna. And with force, they will convert. Why? It's all, allegedly, it's all premised upon this idea of wealth being an indicator of truth, of power being an indicator of truth. But it's not power. Is it power? How could it be power when it robs you of sovereignty? It's not power if you are enslaved by it. It's power over you. That's the problem. And this was the Christ's central message. You cannot serve two masters. But who is the master that you serve? Yourself. And here we think we are selfish. But actually the true selfish person, the only person who knows how to be selfish, is the free soul who thinks only in the spirit, who doesn't care for money or who cannot be threatened, cannot be bought or cannot be threatened. So that was the sadhu. And what happened when Alexander came there, and what's happening now when Swamiji comes here, is we're realizing that we've paid far too painful a price. And not even in the good pain sense. Like, we've paid a heavy price for what we call civilization. Is it even that civilized? So when Alexander saw this sadhu, I think maybe he was impressed and he saw sovereignty. He couldn't get him back to his court by either threat or by temptation. So he went home and died. He went home, got a fever and died, and never conquered India after that. And many years later, the British would come and they would try their best to convince us that what we had discovered after at least 9,000 years of experimentation, honest scientific inquiry, they tried to convince us that we were wrong. Based on the wealth that they had hoarded from us, they tried to convince us that we were wrong. Where are they now? Where are the Mongols now? One by one they come, broken like so many waves upon the rocks of our certainty, because we did not build on a house of sand. We don't care for India. We care for India, which is the common property of everyone. And that's this spirit, inviolable. Nothing can convert it. But notice, if India hardens, if now it tries to draw the sword and wave checks, then it too must fall. Like every empire that has fallen before its feet, it must now fall at the feet of Mother Kali. And maybe that's what's happening, arguably. But if India is to recognize its greatness, it must remember where it got its greatness from. Not from Astra, but from Shastra. Like from knowledge, not from power. And notice the power that comes from knowledge is real power. And so that knowledge, what does it do but make us humble? And that humility, that ability to sit at the feet of someone and like learn and listen, India mastered that. It mastered that. Like the ability to sit and listen is what India learned. And it's always done that. When the Mongols came, it listened closely. It incorporated everything the Muslims had to teach us. When the British came, we listened closely, and now we have railroads and we speak English and shit. Like, I mean, we listened. But when will the West listen? Women are always listening. They're always listening to what the men say. But when will the men fucking listen, right? Like, when will we hear what she has to say? India is speaking. The Great Mother is speaking. Why won't we listen? And what is she telling us? Give up money. The same thing that your Nazarene told you that you ignored because you turned him into some pompous, like, altar piece. Like listen to this simple, barefooted yogi of the West telling us, give up money. Above all, give up money. At least this you can do. Just this. Give up money. How easy would it be to trust in God, to live based on the providence of nature and not money? Ma, Asha, Jai Ma. So we're listening, and here we are at the feet of this yogi. And Alexander, to his credit, listened. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I think he didn't lose here. I don't think this is not the case of like, oh, the West collapsing before the mighty East. It's not that. Both are great, each in their own place, but they have something to teach each other. Not just the East to the West, but the West to the East. But what the West learned, I think it forgot. And maybe what the East knew, it's now forgetting. And there's like a wonderful thing that they can do for each other. And I think that's what happened. Like when Alexander stood in front of the yogi engaged with him, heard what he had to offer, and rejected it. And Alexander, hearing what the yogi had to offer, which was a much deeper, as it were, a sense of sovereignty, a much deeper power than he had ever experienced in his life, having conquered the known world, I think he submitted to that. He sat at the feet of the teacher, I think. And maybe that's all he needed to hear, that there was such a person like this, a state like this. He went home, maybe he realized it. I don't know. But the point all of this is that the outcome of Western materialism, if it's honest, if it's true scientific inquiry, then the logical conclusion that we must come to eventually is that I am one with everything. This universe is sentient, and in me is infinite power. Infinite power because the very thing I look at changes based on the way I'm looking at it. You have no reason then to feel powerless. You have no reason to look at this world and therefore despair. But what makes sense to do is to immediately in this moment move towards that which feels natural and good, as it were. And so a materialist, becoming a hedonist is a very good thing, but often they don't though, right? Often, instead of becoming real hedonist, they give up all their pleasure for this thing called money. In the hopes of pleasure, for getting some future pleasure, they go to work and shit. What the fuck? Like they give up the best years of their life, all the hours of their day. Like they work, their whole schedule is around this thing called work. And for what? For money. Who are you working for? Who is being paid off of your labor? Like hours and hours and hours, you slave behind a counter so that somebody else can collect all the money from it. When will you wake up and come out from your slavery? And it's only a matter of walking out. The prison doors are open, and yet you insist on clocking in and on standing at a desk and breaking your back and giving up your time and energy and mind for someone else to, and what for what? Like when they make the money off your labor, what do you think they're going to do with it? Suffer. You're not doing them any favors by doing their work. And how dare you do someone else's work? Do your own work. Stop living for money. If nothing else comes from this conversation, at least let's resolve to one another to like give up money, because it's nothing worth even giving up. It's just clay. So what Alexander realizes is this: that there's deeper wealth. And arguably now what we're claiming is that an honest materialist will be a true hedonist. But a true hedonist is not usually what we find in materialists. You know what they do? They opt into weird morality and shit. Like, what's weird? They're so skeptical about religious claims, and they're immediately ready to accept every fucking superstition that culture and society offers. About propriety, about manners, about politeness, about political correctness, about purity and impurity. They have the same religious, like, hang-ups, except it's worse, because they don't even have the dignity of, like, they're just as bad as religious people, but they're hypocrites about it because they think they're so wise, think they're so smart. They think they're actual materialists, but they're not, for they have a very superficial understanding of materiality. And they don't even have the courage to be hedonist, because the moment a desire emerges in their heart, they don't do it because they have to go to work. Why do they go to work? Because they're expected to. Like, you're living based off of as abstract a notion as God. At least acknowledge that. And once you acknowledge that, kill that God too. You've already killed the other God. Right? Why don't you kill this God of society? Denounce this God, and trample that God, and take that God back to Vice and Dothrak or some shit. You know, like, go call Drogo on that God. Fuck that God. And if you could have done that to the Christian God with Jesus, you did crucify him after all. Why don't you crucify this God, which you're all living under, the tyranny of mammon, which is not, by the way, pleasure or beauty. It's money. And what is money? It's like an abstract superimposition onto reality of something that's not here now, that you're tricked into thinking has more value than what is. What is here now? Donna Julia's eyes. Right? Like, I'm going to turn away from Donna Julia's eyes to what? Go to work? What could be worth more than Donna Julia's eyes? For that kiss. I can't pay for it, by the way. Like that, like true love's kiss, as it were. Can turn a frog into a prince. That's a transformative kiss. What does it mean to turn a frog into a prince? Arguably, if you just kiss, in other words, if you just allow something to be beautiful for its own sake, meaning true pleasure, right? This is my Taurus and rising in, my sun and rising in Taurus speaking. Forgive me. It's a very Venus rule thing to say, but like if we allow for true beauty, true pleasure, Lakshmi, really Lakshmi, not money, very little like connection between Lakshmi and money. I don't know why they associate the two. But if you allow for Lakshmi, Devi, what you're allowing for is this concept that material is not what I wanted. Remember my thought experiment? If I could give you $1 billion and you wanted it's presumably because you see it as a means to an end. Very rarely will you take my $1 billion if it meant nobody knew you had it, so you can't even get like brownie points for having it, and you can't use it. Why would you want money that you can't use? Then imagine I say you can have it, but whatever you buy with it, you cannot like enjoy. Like what if you buy a Ferrari, you can't drive it or something. You can't even look at it. You can buy the Ferrari, but you can't get into it. What? Why would you want that? Like, see, it's not the money, it's the pleasure or the freedom or the presence or the leisure or the time that you think money will give you. Can you imagine our delusion that for time we go for money, but to get money we have to give up time? Excuse me? Like for time and leisure we want money, but to get money you have to give up time and leisure. And then by the time you have the money that you think will give you time and leisure, you have lost all your energy and peace of mind. In other words, you cannot even enjoy that leisure because you forgot all about pleasure in your mad rush for money. Money is horrible. It's not money though, it's the love of money. But it's not, again, like what is money but like this projection of the future. Saving is terrible. It's a terrible thing. It's okay, you can have a savings account, but it's terrible to think that I should give up the things that do matter. Like this treasure for these balls. So this is the joke. Like somebody comes to Swami Brahman and then they're like, oh my God, you're a sadhu. You've renounced everything. And he laughs and he says, no, I should bow at your feet. You're the one who renounced everything. I gave up a few pieces of glass for a diamond. You gave up the diamond for a few pieces of glass. Who is the greater martyr here? Like who has sacrificed more? It's the person in the world actually who sacrificed the most, being crucified on the altar of... Like, see, materialism is not the problem. Material is real. Consumer capitalism is also maybe not necessarily materialism. Hedonism is not the problem. It's just that we have bad versions of these things. Like, our materialism sucks. That's why we don't feel our oneness with a sentient and inherently creative and powerful and dynamic, desirous universe. That's one problem. But secondly, when we say we are materialists, we don't actually act the part because then we project onto material immaterial things like culture, like laws, like politeness, all these things. These are immaterial. Where are they in matter? Point to them. Show me where your politeness exists in matter. It does not. But beauty is also something maybe we project, but in some sense, material has a way of evoking it from us. Maybe it inheres in things. Maybe in the flower there is beauty. I don't know. Both seem insubstantial, but the difference is that beauty feels good. The other things don't. So why would you trade off what feels good and beautiful and immediately good and beautiful for something that sucks? The only way you could have done that is if someone tricked you into thinking there was some afterlife, which is exactly what you freed yourself from when you stepped out of religion. You just stepped out of that church into this one, and the same people who took your money there are taking your money here. The same thing has happened to you. You got swindled yet again. Fools, come out of this delusion of God. And the thing about God, he's so tricky. He sets up a straw man in the church. So when you kill him there, you think you're free. And you come out and go to your workplace and you think, now I'm free of the tyranny of God. But all the while, you've done the same thing. You've given up what's real for a projected fantasy. And that projected fantasy is called money. So both God and Mammon, kill them both, I think. Right? Kill God first. And then come and kill Mammon. As people usually kill Mammon, and then they want to kill God, but like they don't even know where God is. So if you think you know where God is, kill that God. And then notice, even having killed that God, we don't at all feel the freedom that materialism promises. I wish we could be real materialist. And we're honest, real materialist, we'll be maybe real hedonist, I don't know. At least in the sense that like a scientist is deeply curious about the world. They will look at the world and study the world. That's a kind of hedonism too. It gives them pleasure to do that. But I'm even talking about like brute hedonism. I'm not even talking about the refined human ability to be compassionate and enjoy like ethics and like no. I'm talking about like the fact that like kissing is good and chocolate cake is good. And like these things are more real than money, which is supposed to give me these things. So what if in this moment I let my driving motivation not be what other people wanted me to do, but what if it was just Jaima? Comfy zones? Yes. Oh, you're right. It's a change of the watch soon, right? It's going to be the Sandhya, so they'll change the guard soon. There's a time, maybe we can slip out. Anyway, probably I should put this light back on. But actually, what the fuck? Why would I need this light? Anyway, so here's the thing. The final closing things that I want to say. I'm getting to the end. I just want to say this in closing. I know, right? Maybe the first dawn of the rest of our lives. Something hopefully worth staying up all night to think about. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully we can walk away from all of this free. We'll never need to hear another thing again. Ideally, because we've heard Swamiji tell us that we already are it. And this is the proof. So closing up now, coming to the end of this, we get this profound idea that if we could just be honest hedonist, that would do us a lot of good actually, because that would be the first time we lived authentically. The first time we looked into our heart, and as the universe, if you already established that I'm the universe, then as the universe, what does the universe want to do? Maybe she wants to stay up all night. What does she want to do with staying up all night? I don't know. Maybe they make love. Maybe they fight. Maybe they drink tea. Maybe they talk about religion. I don't know. Maybe they go and rob a bank. I don't know what the universe wants to do. But it's making itself known in this moment through you, through the desire that emerges in your heart. And this is Somananda's claim that even the book has a desire to be a book. The universe is booking. And as long as it desires to be a book, there's a book. And the moment it stops wanting to be a book, the book disintegrates. Like Somananda's, the Shaiva master Somananda, who we studied quite a bit during the summer. Like Somananda's view of reality is that everything is sentient. We can establish that without ever reading the book. We can just do science and establish that. But the thing about sentience is that it's innately desirous. Desirous to be, otherwise what is this? And this doesn't need to be explained. It just is because that's what the universe does. It's the nature of the universe to desire. Therefore, it is your nature to desire. But every single moment you are repressing it. Either through religion, which tells you that these things are sinful and will send you to hell, or through society, which tells you that these things are improper and impolite and you'll go to jail. So in one place they'll tell you go to hell, in the other place they'll tell you go to jail, and in both cases you're being scammed by some abstract concept away from actually for once listening to your heart. And right now it might be chocolate cake. So what? Let it be chocolate cake. If right now Ma wants chocolate cake, let her eat the fucking chocolate cake. Today's chocolate cake is tomorrow's Nirvikalpa Samadhi. I don't give a fuck. But the nature of desire is that it comes from Ma. It will lead you to Ma. Whatever it is, however crazy or antisocial you think that desire is, it's probably good that my face is blurred a little bit now. Because I'm like, this sounds a little bit like some fucking like V for Vendetta type shit, where I'm just like in 4 a.m, streaming from Tehran or some shit, and like bad internet from an internet cafe, anonymously telling Americans like, fuck your government. No, like, fuck. Like this so typical of brown people on the internet. But like, here's the thing. The main thing, the heart of all of this, is that like, what do I have to go off of but this desire? And notice the kind of nihilism that is required to be able to literally like enact every desire from moment to moment is a very different kind of nihilism than the kind that you get from blindly following like what you think you should want. That's what people do. Like, materialism, the reason it's bad is because it's not actually the quest for material. It's the quest for some symbol for material called money. If it was a quest for material, that's okay, but it's not. It's not a quest for material. Even a quest for land is not really even a quest for land. What we want is space, maybe, but having land doesn't give us that. We might be very busy taxing the serfs or something, or preventing the serf rebellion, that we don't have space. As much land as we have, that much space we might remove from our lives in managing all that land. Notice, what we're doing is we're looking for things, material, but the things that we're actually engaging with and trying to acquire are immaterial, like money. Money's immaterial. I can't help it. This is the main thing I have to like hammer in, because if we can accomplish anything today, it's that we walk out of here sannyasins. And what I mean by that is that we walk out of here free. I don't mean you have to get divorced, or you can, by the way. I don't mean you have to quit your job, or you can. I just mean that you stop working for money, and you certainly shouldn't base any decisions around it. Because why? It's not real. So forget money, right? And forget any other symbol for material. And that's usually what we live for. That's why a materialist has a very bad experience of life, because what they're reaching for is immaterial. Like the people in religion who have decided that God is out there. It's immaterial. Their God is immaterial as money. Both are immaterial. Now, if you say, I'm a hedonist based on this materialism, you're not a real hedonist. So you can't actually enjoy what's in front of you. When it's there to enjoy, you're thinking about money. It's bhukti siddhi is something that the goddess can give you. She's tushti rupena samsita. Like, you can't actually get satisfaction from buying things that are beautiful unless you develop the capacity to be with the beautiful. But you cannot develop that capacity until you first learn real materialism, which is the recognition that I am one with this thing that I call beautiful. The moment I objectify it and try to own it, its beauty is gone, because now it's a thing that's locked in. The beauty of the experience was in its dynamism. But the problem with our materialism is that it robs the universe of dynamism because we misunderstand materialism. So therefore, a true hedonist is also a true nihilist, because a true nihilist, arguably, will empty out all cultural constructs of their inherent value. Things like money, things like morality, all of these things are ultimately 6-7. They're all made up. And a true nihilist, having understood that, like in only that mad Shiva and the cremation ground way, like a true nihilist having understood there's literally nothing here that forces you to do anything here, that person is a wonderful force to be reckoned with. Because then what will guide them? Something from within. In the beginning, it might be desire, but I don't think you'll do any evil like here. Because I honestly do feel like the reason why we do so much evil, like I explained earlier, is because we're so frustrated and so sad. Why are we frustrated and sad? Because we never do what we want. From childhood, our parents scold us the moment we try to do what we want. It's so backward because it's the most natural thing for a child to try to do what they want. And they have an intelligence, They will go to bed. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a good example of that. But eventually they'll be tired and they'll go to sleep. They will eat. Eventually they'll eat. But our problem is we want them to do it on our schedule because we have to go to work. Why? Because we want to make motherfucking money. And so to make money, I have to wake up. And since I have to wake up, my kid must go to bed when I tell him to go to bed. And so when he wants to stay up for an extra hour and play and read or some shit or talk to me, if he wants to stay up and listen to a story, I say, no, it's bedtime. Fuck your bedtime. I'm a kid. Speaking as an 8-year-old right now, saying, fuck your bedtime. I do not listen to adults. I don't need to listen to adults. Where is an adult? I've not seen a single adult. I've only seen slaves. Slaves pretending that they're powerful and free. And in their power and freedom, tyrannizing me, a kid, away from all my natural, God-given instincts. If I could just be, in almost a Jean-Jacques Rousseau way, if I could just be left to be wild. If I can be a wild kid. I can be truly free in the way that only children know how to be, in that innocence, in that lack of any judgment, and in that lack of any kind of conditioning. Do you think that a desire arising from such a space is one that will be evil? 'Cause even when the kid I don't know, is mean to his people, even tortures animals or something like that. Even, kids do some really fucked up shit, obviously. But notice it's not really that mean-spirited. It can be destructive, obviously. Kids can be destructive, but it's usually guileless. And often, they might immediately recognize that what they've done. I've seen this all the time. Young kids, they do something that they're doing in play. Just recently it happened. Tess is not here, but Tess was there for it. We were in the cafe and we were playing with these kids, and this kid was being aggressive. And it was interesting because I didn't really mind that he was being that aggressive with me. His mom did, in a way. And the mom was like, but you're hurting him. And then he was like, really? But notice, it wasn't he was like, oh, mom said I can't do it, so I can't do it. It was more like, oh my God, he kind of stopped. He was like, really? Because he didn't want to hurt me. He just wanted to play with me. But what he was doing was kind of aggressive. I didn't mind. I was allowing it. His mom was minded, and he minded, I think. And it was so cute. He was throwing this ball at me, right? And then when he realized that this might maybe be aggressive, he gently and gingerly threw it, kind of tentatively. He was like, is it okay that I still, it was so sweet. But the thing is, kids, they don't mean to do harm. They do it, of course. They're testing and they're playing. But what if, I don't know, we've never tried this, nor do we need to, but what if a child instinctively knows what to do? And how about that instinct is natural and what we do is not natural? So of course that instinct doesn't meet our schedule. We can't understand why a child does what she does. And so we have to understand it. We have to get her to flow around orbitals because children need structure. But wait. Why does it have to be my structure or your structure? Our structures suck. What about this? Isn't there's an innate structure, no? And that structure is something we cannot understand. Why don't the child base his life, her life, its life off of that? Why don't we do that now? What if instead of going with the clock, we just, I don't know, didn't? Wouldn't that be exciting? And that's what we did tonight. And that's what we do every day. And that's what the rest of our lives is going to be like. Moment to moment, just do what you want. Really, literally, try and see. Yeah, you might lose your job or your spouse or your house or your mouse. You'll be much happier for it. You'll be freer for it. If even one person today becomes a sadhu, and arguably we're all born sadhus, we just forget. We're all born artists and we forget. Then that would be Swamiji's message properly delivered. Not concepts, but life. And what kind of life? A free life. And that's the only kind of life worth living. And it's the kind of life worth dying for, honestly. So what if you die? What if you just decide right now, and the kind of vow I'm taking with you is right now I'm just going to do what I want. And I've only ever done that. But what if, and I can't say that actually, there are times when I haven't. But as far as I remember, this is what it feels like to be free. Just whatever you want, whenever you want. And notice, what you naturally want will probably not harm others. It's only when we want something and we hate ourselves for it that we harm others. When we want something and we have no problem with wanting it, and then we allow it to flow, we become, as it were, attuned to the overall flux and flow of what we realize is not actually static matter, but dynamic possibility. And then we find that if right now what I wanted was chocolate cake, in truth, something else is moving me. And after the chocolate cake, I might read a book. And in that book, I might discover something that will allow me to do the next thing in my life. And one by one, these things in my life lead me to like deeper and deeper realizations of God. But all the while, I'm just following God. God's voice in my heart telling me to smell the flower. So I think this is materialism. This is hedonism. This is true nihilism. And in this kind of physicalism, this Shakta physicalism, in this physicalism is a real freedom. And not once did we touch a Bible, a mala. Not once did we utter a mantra. All we did is look. And when we looked, all we saw is Ma. So what is matter? It's just Ma there. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharine. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Vivekananda Arpanam Astu. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Murta Maheshwara Vireshwara Vivekananda Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Jai Swamiji.